These very toxic anti-anxiety medication is an $18 billion a year industry in itself.
There is a financial incentive for this entire ecosystem of lies to exist. So if the mental health industry is essentially a lie, then how can this Amanita Muscaria mushroom be the answer to the lie?
Alex Wolfe is a former airline pilot and co-founded one of the largest public cannabis companies in Canada. He now runs a mushroom-based nutritional supplement company called Eons, focusing on mental health benefits.
The Amanita Muscaria is a sacred mushroom. It's been around for thousands and thousands of years. This is nature's technology, right? This is upgrading the hardware with the software. This is the organic intelligence. And in microdoses, it's extremely beneficial. Alcohol addiction, cocaine addiction, PTSD, severe anxiety, depression. We're talking like 75 to 90% cure rates.
What have you learned the most from the healing aspect of nature's expression through this mushroom?
It's a bridge from the conditioned mind, and it creates a space where now you can tap into the divine mind, the divine nature that we truly are. The mushroom itself is innately intelligent, so it knows why you're using it. Are you trying to escape from something? Are you trying to avoid something? So it's like once you build the relationship with the mushroom, it actually starts showing you things about yourself. This is the soul revealing aspect of it.
If this mushroom's been around for so long, why hasn't it been an integral part of mental health care? So the DSM-5, it's this trivial, crazy, insane thing that's been created from the APA, the American Psychiatric Association, that really keeps people in bondage. And what's really fascinating to me about it is that it's one of the biggest psyops of our time. So if the mental health industry is essentially a lie, then how can this Amanita Muscaria mushroom be the answer to the lie?
The Amanita Muscaria is a sacred mushroom. It's been around for thousands and thousands of years. Dates back to ancient Christianity, ancient Hinduism. Vikings used it, and they all knew this sacred power of it. Because what it does is it's a bridge from the conditioned mind, which is bondage, which is trapped, to form, and it creates a space where now you can tap into the divine mind, the divine nature that we truly are. So that's the big trap of big pharma and the DSM-5 is it just keeps the user, keeps one stuck in their conditioned mind, which is very limited, and they essentially can't stop thinking. And when in reality, our divine nature is in the space between our thoughts, but very few people are able to actually stop thinking. That's the trap. And this mushroom is divinely connected to nature. It only grows in nature. It can't be replicated. It can't be farmed. It can't be grown with, spores or seeds or anything like that. It grows when it wants to grow. It's completely seasonal and it's completely symbiotic. It just needs the recipe of the creator in specific circumstances to grow. And when it grows, it's like a gift. And who's ever there to receive this gift can get it and, utilize it to tap into divinity. And that's a major code.
I love this phrase of code. You are the one that brought this to my life, codes.
Yeah.
And it's come out in a lot of videos we've done. Actually, it's been great for a lot of podcasts because the concept of code really comes from either computer or video game. And one thing that I've been really realizing, brother, is that I am the player and the programmer at the same time.
Yeah.
And it's such a crazy concept. So if I'm being fed a program by the APA, by the DSM-5, then I'm going to believe that. I don't think that our parents and grandparents have malice or evil in their hearts. I think they love us. They really love us with the level of consciousness they have. Yet so many people that are in these positions are essentially a slave to Wetiko or this, what the Native Americans call the mind virus. So just some facts that are actually on the screen if you're watching right now on YouTube or Spotify. 2025, this just happened, Alex. I don't know if you heard of this. Purdue Pharma, maker of OxyContin, agreed to a $7.4 billion settlement. This just happened this year. 2022, $26 billion settlement from Johnson & Johnson. Big Pharma funds the APA. The APA creates the DSM-5. There is a financial incentive for this entire ecosystem of lies to exist. And I wonder with that frame, this ancient wisdom that we're talking about today, and for y'all that are watching, I'm holding this up to the camera right now. This is dialed. This has been like 3 years in the making, 2 years in the making.
2 years, yeah.
2 years. I actually just took some right before we hit the record button. This has been around for, I think some of the data is around 250 million years, this mushroom, back to the dinosaurs. And it's so interesting that the codes of nature that have been here since the dinosaurs were walking is now being the answer to the lie. What do you make of this?
Well, yeah, this is divine nature. This is organic intelligence. This comes from the creator. And the mushrooms are the oldest living organism. It's the largest living organism, and studies are showing it's the smartest living organism. So if you're going to align with the living organism on this earth, why not make it the oldest, smartest, and largest? So that's the way I look at it. And when we go back to, big pharma and these lies and these programs, like you said, and it goes back to the coding. So when we get these programs, we store them in our vessel. And the vessel for me is like our mind, body, and soul. And these programs given to us by oftentimes our parents who mean well, and they were programmed, from their parents who did the best they could, and society and the education system and the media and all this kind of stuff. But we're programmed with these limitations, and they're often based in lack and in fear and in doubt. And you could even look at the 7 deadly sins as these 7 deadly programs, and Jesus would say, he came to help the sinners. No matter what your religious beliefs are, I still think there's a lot of wisdom to that. And he's like, he came to help the sinners, not the righteous, because he knew he had compassion for them, because it wasn't their fault, because they were programmed. And he knew this. And that's the way I look at these programs as well. Is like, it's not our fault. This is the world that we grew up in, but it's to learn to operate in the world, but not be of the world. And this is where codes, the line codes comes from, is once you get the new code, you have a new perspective. And with a new perspective, you can see things differently. And when you see things differently, you have a new outlook. And now all of a sudden you're going in a new direction. And when you go to a new direction, now you have a new destination, a new destiny. But it all starts with that code. It's a divine piece of wisdom. And once you embody that wisdom, it's at first it's just knowledge. It's just like it's a shiny piece of knowledge. But once you get to apply it in your life, it turns into wisdom. And now you embody that. And then other people, you could share that with others. So I think people only really resonate with wisdom once it's embodied.
Man, I've been on this path of seeking wisdom for a long time. 10 years on this podcast. This is our 10th year. And I am never surprised, although I am pleasantly surprised, when I get new codes. And the code that I just received this year was a new definition of wisdom. Because I used to think about wisdom as the integration of all the parts of self and compassion and capacity for the courage to live my dream in the collective, in the integration of all these things. But what I realized was that it was a different definition. I wonder how you feel about this.
Love to hear.
Wisdom is the ability to relate yourself to nature's laws, as to make them serve you, and the ability to relate yourself to other people, so to gain their harmonious, willing cooperation in helping to yield whatever you demand of it.
I love it.
I mean, the hair on my arms is standing up right now. It's so good. And there's many definitions of wisdom, but what arises with you in this conversation of mental health and plant wisdom, essentially, fungi wisdom, when I read that definition to you?
Yeah, it totally resonates with me. It's the codes of nature, which is, for me, stems from divinity. God, creator, higher power, the universe, however you want to say it, created nature, and it's filled with wisdom, and it's being able to tap into that, to communicate with that, to pay attention to that we can get these codes, and they're all there for us to pay attention to. And it's really a choice what we decide to give our precious attention to. I believe it's the most valuable currency that we have. We're gifted with 24 hours in a day if we're lucky. It's really a gift. And so it's like, what do we choose to pay attention to in those 24 hours? And there's so many things. There's so many distractions. There's so much noise. So many things vying for our attention. But if we can choose to pay attention to nature and the elements, I believe there's real codes there. And once we pay attention to these, we can start to play with them and dance with them, explore them, and embody them. And the more that we can embody them, we're getting closer and closer to our divine nature within, which is actually within us the whole time, which is really cool, because the opposite of that is constantly looking outwards. But really, all the codes are really within ourselves, which is true divinity.
So do you mean, what I'm getting from you is that the more we're paying our attention as currency, because I'm with you, the war for attention is actually a Trojan horse for the war of the mind and the war of the soul, but it gets in through a phone or a computer screen or what have you, even hanging around with the wrong people. And when I say wrong, I mean people that are operating at a survival frequency, people that are not committed to understanding and embodying the divine mind. But I wonder how you make this senseful and meaningful for you, this concept of the divine mind. And how is that integrated and embodied into you since our last podcast? I think it's been over a year. I've seen you transform in ways that is amazing. And I think one of the cool parts about being your friend and being a partner with you in business is that I get to love and accept every new version of you that comes through. I think it's easy for us to get attached to an old version of someone, but we do men's work together, we do business together, we do podcasting together. It's super special because I get to learn a new version of Alex over and over and over again. So how is this integrated for you, this divine mind concept, in the past, year and a half since we podcasted?
I love that. Major wisdom in that. Love and acceptance. Yeah, those are two major codes in itself. So I love that reflection. And yeah, really started with working with this mushroom. I'm a businessman, I'm an entrepreneur, and I got the insight to work with this mushroom over 2 years ago. It was really like truly a download that, hey, there's this mushroom. It was shown to me, I believe, by the creator. Said, hey, there's this mushroom. It was shown to me, just the image of this mushroom. And I was like, wow, okay, I've seen this mushroom before. This infamous red and white capped mushroom.
The one that's in all the Mario Brothers games.
Yeah, it's in Mario Brothers.
It's freaking everywhere.
It's everywhere. It's the most famous mushroom, which is wild. And
it's the emoji on the phone.
It's on the emoji on all of our phones.
Crazy.
It's Santa Claus. It goes on and on.
That's right.
It's been in our minds, been in our subconscious mind.
Yeah.
But I didn't have a relationship with this mushroom besides using it as the emoji. So I began to research it, and I was like, hey, well, I got to develop a relationship with this mushroom. And so I did. I started taking many kinds of doses, microdoses, macrodoses, large doses, and really forming a relationship with this mushroom with the intention to bring it to market. And the more that I learned about it, I learned so much, but it really started teaching me. It started transforming me. And I had, as you know, I even talked about this on the podcast over a year ago. I with my intentions, I was trying to bring it to market then. And I said in the podcast, it'll be out by the time this podcast is out. Ha is right, because the mushroom had its own plan, and it does. It's innate intelligence, and it's like, it doesn't matter what you want, Alex, Wolfe. This mushroom will come out when it's ready to come out, and it really put me through the ringer, and it got me to really go within, and it really got me to unwind programs that I had running that I wasn't aware of, and finally face these programs once and for all, and let them go and surrender and laugh at them and, cry about them and all the things, but really had to face off with these programs once and for all. And I'm so glad I did. And it was just so, dialed or ironic that, once I finally shed these programs and released them, well, it was like a week later that Dialed was ready to come to market and everything just lined up. And it was like, yeah, okay, you're ready to be, the ambassador for this or the steward for this mushroom. And that was really interesting. So with that, there was 3 major things that I had to face off, major programs that were running in the background of my my conditioned mind this whole time that were really had me like on a leash. So I was paying my attention to these things and they were bringing me where they wanted to bring me. That part of my mind had me on a leash, and it was really material goods, food, and sex. And when I got to face off with these three things, and it was like, okay, like I'm not going to feed this any more attention anymore. I'm going to stop trying to consume things to like fill a void. I'm not going to eat what this part of my brain is telling me to eat anymore. And I'm not going to have, any frivolous sex. It's going to be, next time I have sex, it's going to be to create. It's going to be to create love and possibly a child. That's what I, realized. And when I unprogrammed these three things, it was the major unlocking. And with that came so much more awareness, so much more levels of consciousness that I actually hadn't reached before, to be quite honest. And it opened up many layers, and it gave me more and more access to the divine mind, which is your creativity, your intuition, your imagination, just, for starters. And I think, the more that we tap into the divine mind, those are like superpowers right there that are being underutilized because we spend so much time leashed to that conditioned mind. So now it's really become an unleashing process. And that in itself has been so valuable. And yes, I know this product can help many, many people. But just from my own experience, it's been extremely, extremely valuable.
One of the things I love from my deceased mentor, if there's ever two people I would love to interview, it'd be Jesus and Alan Watts.
Yeah.
And I'd love to have them sit right at the table. And I would ask Jesus, what is the meaning of all this? And how can we really learn to love each other at an accelerated rate? That would be my question to Jesus. I would ask Alan Watts, how do you actually dance with the devil inside of yourself? I would ask him that, because when the whole time you were speaking, the question that was bubbling for me was this Alan Watts quote. And he said, when you claim your dreams to the universe, the devil will hear it and the collective karma will come for the credit that is due.
Oof.
And it's so powerful because you had to have had temptations and things coming up where essentially the devil, which, all is God, the devil came for the credit that was due. How did you fend with that? And how did you learn to dance with it instead of fighting against it? These feelings that we feel, the sex, the food, the material goods.
Yeah. Well, I got to get really familiar with that voice, call it the devil or Satan or the opponent, the adversary, whatever you want to call it. I believe it's all the same thing, that voice.
Would you call it the lower self that's attached to the survival programs and paradigms?
Yes.
Would that be one way that you describe it?
Yes.
Okay.
We all have it.
Yeah.
And some people are more aware of it than others. And I started listening to it, like observing it, I should say, not following what it would tell me to do, but just really listening to it. And I started to identify that voice and, realizing its true essence. What was it really trying to get me to do?
Yeah.
And it was all based on survival. It was based on fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And once I identified that so clearly and I just observed it, didn't give it any power, I didn't fight it because, as you said, what you resist persists, what you fight strengthens, So I didn't give it that. I was just like almost laughing at it. And I was like, oh, that's very interesting that you would say that. Thank you for saying that, but I'm not going to follow that anymore. And the more I started to do that, just like give it its credit, but then go do most times the opposite of what it was telling me to do, which was often something very uncomfortable. But in that uncomfortability is growth, So it was like, okay, I realized that this voice was always trying to get me to do the comfortable thing, whether that was with food, material goods, sex, for three examples that I got to face off with. And I just realized, I was like, yeah, no, this is the opponent. This is like a training partner. Like if you look at I like to use the Rocky movies, like Apollo Creed was the training partner that made Rocky better, but if he didn't have Apollo Creed, he wouldn't have got to where he was gotten, and I see that as the opponent, like you said, created by the creator. Like it's not this outside force. It's still part of the game that we're playing. And it's actually, if we can if we can override it, if we can, choose a different path, I believe that's the whole point, is we get to rise higher, and it's there to actually help us rise above if we could choose to do so. It's all a choice. And it always came back to that, Josh, it was like, you always have a choice. So which voice are you going to feed, basically? Are you going to feed the conditioned limited survival brain, or are you going to choose to listen to what the creator wants to tell you? And that was the big realization for me, is like, we always have a choice. And I started just shifting to be like, no, I want to choose a different path.
I'm already like just loving exactly the timing of this in my life. And I know that anyone watching or listening is going to connect with this entire conversation, but specifically this unique detour that I'm going to take for a second. Yes, we're here to talk about mental health because it's near and dear to my heart. My mom has been 40 years plus suffering, absolutely suffering with bipolar. And if this technology existed and she was able to use it, I wonder, I really wonder that her life could have been different. And that curiosity is coming from love, because I've seen just the absolute tragedy that bipolar is, not just for my mom, but for so many people that struggle. It's it's absolutely heartbreaking. And the detour that relates to mental health is the voice in the head is still us.
Yeah.
It's still an aspect of us. And I've learned by being friends with you, by doing men's work, by podcasting for a decade, absorbing so much knowledge, that the only way I'm ever going to earn wisdom to be able to cultivate the capacity to say no, or to exercise, as you put it, the power of choice, it comes through hardship. It comes through these lessons that happen over and over and over again, until the student finally learns the ultimate lesson. And that is, I cannot fight against something with force. I cannot try to defeat it and slay it. The language that I use in my journey of development is so powerful. It's the entire process, because as I'm speaking to you, everything in my body is resonating, and so is yours. So we're spending time with each other in this concept of, how do we cultivate the courage to have greater capacity where we can exercise our power of choice, to thank the voice for being there, to appreciate that it may be in some ways a protector, a guardian of growth, if you will. So if growth is behind a gate, then this voice is like, thou shalt not. You are not ready to enter the gate of growth. But it's the same thing we see, Alex, over and over and over again in the hero's journey, where there's the separation, initiation, and return. And every time the return of the wisdom in any story is always where the person or the hero learned to fight from peace, which is the opposite of fighting. What do you make of this?
Yeah, peace is power. That's what comes up immediately. And it's, in order to get to that peaceful state, I believe there's a surrender that has to happen. And it's because the conditioned mind takes things as far as it could go. The doer, the constant doer, do this. And it really has people on a leash. And I'm speaking from experience. I was on that leash for a long time. And I was a great doer. I did so many things and accomplished so many things in the matrix, and built companies and flew airplanes and all this kind of stuff. But I was really I was the doer. And the doer can only take you so far. It's only one part of the equation. It's very limited. And so once you take the doer as far as it could go, and you realize that in the doer, there's no fulfillment. It's never enough. There's always something else to do. And eventually you get to the point where, if you're lucky, you just say, I can't do this anymore. I'm not doing this. And there's a surrender. And I've heard this with so many people on this podcast too, where they just say, I can't do this anymore. And you literally have this conversation out loud with yourself, or in quiet, but I had it out loud. I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like, this is not working. I've taken this as far as I could go. And I believe in that conversation of surrender, it's really letting the conditioned mind know, the doer, the opponent, like, yeah, I'm not playing this game anymore. And with that, there's a humility and there's an open heart, like we've talked about. And with that open heart, the creator, the Holy Spirit of Yeshua cannot resist that. He's there just waiting for you to be like, okay, I'm ready to try something else. I'm ready to go into the divine mind. And it's literally almost instantaneously, once you have this surrender moment, that a new path will be shown to you, because it's like, okay, I'm not taking this conditioned path anymore. And in that, there's peace, knowing that it's like, okay, there's another way. And then from there, yes, the opponent will keep trying to get you back and throw his little fish hooks at you to try to capture your attention. Mm-hmm. But there's a choice, and you could choose, no, I'm gonna choose a different path now. I'm gonna choose these different modalities or devotion. And that's what I've been exploring.
One of the things I love about philosophy, religion, or just studies of the human experience is that they're all trying to make meaning out of our life and what we're going through. And I love the way you articulated that, because as you were speaking, this is when I know that I'm really locked in or I'm really dialed with someone, is as they're speaking, I'm seeing a movie play in my mind. Mm. And when you were speaking, I was flashing back to a scene from Finding Joe, which is one of my favorite movies. If y'all haven't seen this, you have to go watch it. Mm. It is so good. It's about the golden Buddha and the concept that everything we need is within us. And it's actually true. It's not just spiritual, esoteric babble. It's real. It's practical. And there was a scene where they quoted the hero's journey in Joseph Campbell, where it's the cave that you fear to enter holds the treasure that you seek. Mm-hmm. And it sometimes can be this platitude that we read about or we see on social media, but the platitude is real. It's so real. The very thing that we are most afraid of, AKA that we're just hell-bent on doing, then we actually block this divine mind from coming in. Mm-hmm. And the divine mind wants us to be in joy. It wants us to succeed. It wants us to serve. It wants nothing more than that, but it can't give it to us unless we've transcended this survival mechanism. Mm-hmm. And I almost said bullshit. It's not bullshit. It's actually part of the journey. Mm-hmm. It's part of the journey of understanding. What was one of the caves that you really feared to enter that gave you the treasure that you were seeking?
Yeah, so good. And that is the code right there, is the cave that you fear to enter. That's where the dragon is. But once you face off with the dragon and you slay that dragon, you get the gold.
Well, in the movie, the young boy actually gave the dragon a hug.
Oh, well, there you go.
And that was how he beat the dragon.
That's so cool. That's better than I could have ever put it. It's so cool. And oftentimes that is the way, is just with peace and forgiveness and acceptance. You don't have to kill it. You don't have to fight it, but you do have to face off with it. And that was the thing that I was avoiding. I kept putting my worth on doing an accomplishment, and I would justify it by, creating companies to make an impact, right? And the bigger the company, well, there's more things I got to do. Mm-hmm, right? Mm-hmm. And that sounds good. And it's a great thing to tell people.
Yeah.
And it's true. And that is my goal, is to make an impact, but it really starts with oneself. So I shifted it from the external to the internal. And I really went within, and I made my main priority before I do anything, before I literally do anything, that I go within and I look for these dragons. I look for the blockages, whatever is blocking my manifestation from manifesting into the world. And I've realized this code, that whatever your dream is, it's very achievable. It's very real. It's waiting. The creator actually wants to give you everything and more than you could ever imagine. Even your biggest, wildest dream is too small for the creator. It's like, it's infinite. It's abundant, because the creator is truly infinite and abundant. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So whatever you're thinking is too small, because you're in the conditioned mind. So, but even in that, whatever you want to manifest, the only reason why it hasn't manifested is there's a blockage. So it's like you have to go to the last place that you would ever look with your eyes. Where's that? Well, it's within. You close your eyes, you go within, and you start communicating with the creator, with the divine, and asking him or her, ask the infinite intelligence, what is blocking me? And start to have a conversation. And this can look like prayer. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. This can literally just be a conversation, but it's shifting from, if you think about it, like the thinking conditioned mind is always talking, right? It never shuts up. So it's just like this constant voice that's going on and on. Well, imagine if you were in a conversation like you and I just was talking the entire time. And in this case, let's say you're the creator, and the creator is just waiting for you to stop talking so he can tell you the wisdom.
Yeah.
And that's really what I realized what was going on is like, I need to quiet my mind. I need to quiet down this voice so I could listen to what the creator wants to tell me, because he really does. And it's like, you're a father, Josh, you know this. Like, I'm sure you want to give Nova everything, right? Like everything he could ever ask for. I'm sure you want to give it to him.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, I think there's going to be a time where Nova's like, don't worry, Dad. I want to do this on my own. I want to go out into the world and do my thing, like, let me just go and prove it that I could do it. And you're gonna be like, okay, Nova, but whenever you're ready, I'll be here for you, I'll be here whenever you need, son, just give me a call. And I believe that's the relationship that's going on with the creator is like, we told our dad, okay, Dad, I'm going to go into the world and I'm going to do this thing, I'm going to prove it that I could do this on my own. And he's like, yeah, go ahead, son, no problem. And he's literally just waiting for us to be like, okay, Dad, I can't really do this on my own. And that was my realization. It was when I went within and finally quieted that mind. I let it say what it needed to say. And I was like, yeah, no, I'm not listening to that. I'm asking the creator, give me the light, give me the strength, show me the way. What do I need to do so that I can, receive the light so that I could share it with others? It's not about me. It's not even about my family or my community or anything. It's like, I want to just share this with everyone. Show me how to do that. And the more that I do that, the more that is shown to me. And as long as I look at it as I'm here to share this with others, I'm just a messenger. There's nothing inherently special about me or Alex Wolfe. It's just I am learning to tap in to the creator so that I could share this with others. And that was the big dragon inside the cave.
And it breathes big fire too, because depending on the level of conditioning that you or I or us have received from our parents that I believe loved us in their heart, it actually is connected to an epigenetic expression of emotional trauma that goes back so far that maybe it's connected to when the first fire was found. I mean, really, if you see us as a story that's unfolding, that has always gone back and always will go forward and maybe will repeat, then the lessons aren't just something that our mind can comprehend, is what I'm saying. The real wisdom and the real lessons come from the unspoken. They come from the, one could say, somatic experience or tuning yourself to God or that which created you. And I find this is so fascinating because part of the reason we're even talking about this is because we have, both of us, the mushroom in our system right now that's informing the way that I use my voice box and the water in my body to resonate towards you. So let's go back because we had a nice detour. The real power of this, both scientifically and spiritually, is about neurogenesis, the blooming and creation of new neurons. It's about the neurology that happens when the axons and the dendrites communicate and there's new thought forms that are possible because we're actually upgrading the hardware.
Yes.
So this is really unique because this is a software that affects the hardware. Can you talk about that, the neurology of this mushroom, why it's so specific to the blooming and creation of new thought forms?
Yeah, I love that. So well said, Josh. Yeah, so it's really, this is nature's technology, right? This is upgrading the hardware with the software. This is the organic intelligence. And what it does is it amplifies the neurons in our brain, right? So our brain is filled with neurons, millions, if not billions of neurons. But what does that really mean? Well, these neurons are literally like antennae. And what does that mean? Well, they're receivers. Okay, what does that mean? Well, they're able to receive the information, the codes from the field, from the collective field, the universe, the infinite intelligence. So it's like, well, why wouldn't you want to upgrade your software so that you can have a greater communication with the infinite intelligence, right? And that's what this is about. It's really about rebalancing. We've taken the conditioned mind as far as we can, and now we have AI involved, and AI is a wonderful tool, and I get that. I utilize AI. And I want to be careful, and I want to balance that with the OI, the organic intelligence from the divine, from the creator. so that I can be a harmonized human being and be in rhythm with the law of rhythm, which is one of the universal laws. So that's what this does, is it really creates a space around our thoughts, which is in the conditioned mind. And in that space, I believe the Creator's waiting for us to communicate with him from that field. And now it's strengthening our neurons. And that's what it's doing. It's working on the GABA receptor. So it's quieting down the noise. And that's where the name dialed comes from. There's a lot of noise going on with everything that's going on in our phones and our screens and the food that we eat, like everything that we consume, whether it's through our mouth, or it's through our eyes, truly like the windows to our soul. So everything that we're consuming through these windows of our soul is going and it's being stored in our subconscious, our body, like you said. And when it's consumed in there, at some point it's going to have to be processed. And there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of garbage that's been consumed. So it's like, okay, I'm trying to rebalance that with tapping into more of the divine, more into nature. And that's what this does, is it creates that space, quiets down the mind, creates the space so that we can tap in literally within where the Creator is. And that's where I believe true wisdom is, so that we can stay balanced, so that we don't let things go too far with this conditioned mind that, will take us on all kinds of different paths.
I love the OI and the AI.
Yeah.
Because I'm going deep into AI right now. I'm actually in a mastermind. And I want to be, my intention is to be a steward of the integral and also the integrity-based use of artificial intelligence, right? With our organic intelligence. But if we do get to be cautious, because if we just see AI as a panacea for business growth or for societal change, then we can actually use AI, but we can lose our humanness.
Totally.
And that's really, really important for everyone to pay attention to, because look, the solution that we need here when it comes to how we started our conversation, which is the APA and the DSM essentially being a lie, the lawsuits that are out for everyone to see in plain sight. I don't need to fight against these forces. They're actually just there. If you take a moment to dial yourself and just look and just take a breath and just look, almost like looking over a cliffside at a city, you would just see the truth bubbling up of the pharmaceutical industry and its impact on Congress and its impact on the DSM-5. It actually created it. One thing that I thought was utterly heartbreaking is that the DSM-5, actually 69% of the DSM-5 was informed by what's called task force members. And they had 100% financial ties to the pharmaceutical industry. So if 69% of the book that is actually a rule book, quote, quote, for psychiatrists to prescribe medicine has been created by the very medicine-making companies that give the solution, one has to just wonder, from just an observational standpoint, is this real? Or is this just a construct? Is this just a game? I would venture to say unequivocally, yes, it is just a game. So the real solution is functional psychiatry, where you look at gut health, brain health, trauma. You start to use these ancient medicines that have been around for so long. And I think it's this functional psychology that's really got me excited. The blending of AI, OI, and functional psychiatry is the next level. I mean, you went through this. You had a pretty severe gut dysbiosis for a while, and your mentor was like, hey, why don't you just pay attention to eating better foods?
Yeah.
Can you go back to that and explain that for people that didn't hear it on the first show? I think this is really important as we dive into the functionality of being a real healer for yourself or getting coached by a therapist.
Yeah, well said, Josh. And absolutely, the functional part of it was really the catalyst of this whole shift that I went down as, being very much the doer, taking that as far as I could go, and still being unfulfilled, right? So I had I just talked to him the other day, actually. It was his birthday the other day, and I checked in with him. I had a friend, shareholder, who was a naturopathic doctor, holistic doctor, and he specialized in gut health, in the gut biome. And yeah, he'd been studying the gut biome for 20 years, and obviously he knew that there's a major connection from the gut brain to the brain in our heads, right? And it's the vagus nerve. And it really, it really moderates your whole nervous system, which is pretty wild. And the clearer your gut health, the better your mental health, and vice versa. There's a symbiotic relationship there. And I had no idea about that. And he put me on a functional mushroom protocol. And that was the start of the change. I finally had clarity again. And that was the big code at the time that it had been years since I had that clarity where I could just see things. And I like the way you put it as the cliff, overlooking at the cliff. For me, it was like tapping into the eagle, where I was like, prior to that, I was like in this blizzard of like all kinds of stuff going on, and I couldn't see clearly. And I'm being brought to all these different scenarios, and I got to tap in with the eagle, and the eagle was like, I went from a blizzard to like, it was a breeze up here. I had that clarity again, and that was really cool. And yeah, with that, then with the clarity, I started to move better into the world. I started to show up better into the world. And it was really those functional mushrooms that really put me onto that. And because I had the clarity, then I could start making more optimal choices. And that led to the breath work and to the, the meditations again, and the sauna and all these kind of things, these indirect paths to wellness, to these indirect paths to our divine nature. And I believe there's indirect paths, which are very essential, especially when we get, really cluttered. And then there's the more direct path, which is really just tapping in with that I am presence, which I believe is the name of the creator, is the I am. And they're both equally valuable. But for me, that was how I got started on that indirect path again. And it was because of the functional mushrooms of, that organic intelligence.
Yeah, once we address the functionality of how things were built to be, in other words, homeostasis, then we can start to walk this ladder of change. Like a lot of the concepts that you've brought forth and that we bring forth on the podcast, they're really vast, they're really big. And one thing that I've been playing around with about how I can do even better of a job of is how to take these massive concepts and boil them down into just the really important, potent steps that allow you to create real change. And one of the things that I've seen time and time again in my own life and in your life and in everyone's life is exactly what Napoleon Hill struggled with in Outwitting the Devil. And I've been listening to it on repeat lately because it's exactly where I am.
It's a great book.
I'm 10 years into podcasting. We're now going through a really big crunch phase in business. And I think that's really where we meet ourselves, dude. We meet ourselves in the discomfort of anything that's not in integrity or anything that's out of alignment, AKA integrity. So I wonder, as you start to bring this to the marketplace, it's not necessarily, quote, easy. I know that you have a flow and a way that you're doing it that's probably 10 times more powerful than it would have been if it came out a year ago, right? If you were trying to force it, but the mushroom had other plans. So in this lesson plan of taking large concepts and bringing them down to the real things that create change, knowing what Napoleon Hill went through and knowing that this is actually the process for any person that wants to create or to be in the divine mind and tapped into the creator, we're going to hit pretty hard walls at times. Is there a wall when it comes to the entire psychiatric market, the entire mental health world that you feel Eons is starting to hit up against already?
I mean, there's signs, there's indicators of that, where there's things that have come out in the media where like they'll try like hit pieces towards Amanita Muscaria.
Yeah.
And I could see how, the average person may be put off by that, or like there's a fear thing that's based on there. But when you really start to research even just a little bit, like you could tell how fake, like how manipulative these stories are being, because when you actually really start to go into any research, even in the articles themselves, they're like, well, there's actually nothing that shows that, the active ingredient is doing anything harmful. So it's like, I could see that starting, and that's fine. That's just part of the game. I've been involved in those games throughout most of my career in cannabis. Like when I first started, like cannabis was illegal in Canada, where I was, and I we ended up bringing that company out, and it was a publicly traded company, and cannabis became legal, and that was a whole thing. And we got to just see how the media is constant. It's a chess game, going on, but I'm playing a different game now. I'm playing the internal game, And as long as my internal world keep raising the frequency within, I'm unlocking these new parts of the game, and the truth will always be prevailed. The truth will always be shown. It'll always be brought to the light. So as long as I just keep tapping into the light, and it's ironic because I go within where it's dark within to receive this light. But as long as I keep showing up with love and light, it's all going to be revealed, and there is darkness that you have to go through, or I had to go through for sure. And I think that's part of the game. And you said it earlier, Josh, was before we were recording, but like the blessing is in the beating because that's part of the game. It's just like if you look at it like a video game, which I love to do because I grew up playing video games. That's how you get better in the game, is by beating the bad guy. You don't get to go on to the next level until you beat Bowser, right? But you take the mushroom, you expand, you get bigger, you take the flower, now you got the fireballs, and you take the star, and then you're invincible. Like these are all, I believe, analogies or metaphors for these natural technologies that we can absorb and embody to beat the bad guy, because it's all part of the game. If there was no beatings, we wouldn't get better, right? Sometimes you got to do the same level 50 times. But then that's part of it. If it was just this easy breezy game, well, that wouldn't really be any fun. And there's a major teacher in pain. And that's something I realized as well this past year. That was a big change for me, was looking at pain like it's a good thing. Like I used to avoid pain. I used to, not want to feel pain and would rather biohack my way out of it or whatever this stuff was, which is great. It's fine. But the pain is, if one can learn to embrace the pain, it really shortens the process. And you look at it, you just reframe it as, wow, this is actually a good thing. And in doing that is very freeing. It's very liberating.
Oh, wow. So much there. Okay, let's go one step deeper to the realness.
Yeah.
If this mushroom has been around since the dino age, why has it not been a huge part of mental health and bipolar, even schizophrenia, all these things? In other words, if this mushroom's been around for so long, why hasn't it been an integral part of mental health care?
Well, I think it's pretty easy to research that, the Rockefellers came onto the scene and took over the pharmaceutical industry and made it all about petroleum-based products, which is pretty wild. And, then that led into the whole Medicare system, and which is really, people, this may trigger people, but just look it up, do your own research, look how the Rockefellers all started, right? It's out there. This information is there. And they really created the whole Medicare system, healthcare system, quote unquote, which is really like the death care system. And because once you get ill, you get sick from all these other things that are going on, and then you go to your doctor and he's like, okay, well, I'll just put you on this medication, and which is, based in petroleum, which is pretty wild. There's no really getting off of it, unless it's a tough road to get off that. It's one medication after another after that. And I think, we're starting to see this being unraveled and revealed. And, God bless, Bobby Kennedy Jr., because he's standing up to these people, and it's a wonderful thing to see. And this goes back to like the truth coming to light, and it can be intimidating. It could be scary to go up against these gigantic corporations, but it's just part of it. It's part of the hero's journey, it's like going to face off with these dragons and just knowing that. Yeah. So back to answer the question, this mushroom has been around for thousands and thousands of years. And I don't know if it was actually there when the dinosaurs were there, but I'll take your word for that.
I mean, that was what my research showed. Now, these are guesstimates.
Sure.
Right. But we know it's definitely millions.
Yes.
Okay. It's just millions.
Yes.
If something's been around for millions of years.
Yeah.
Why has it not been leveraged for modernity's healthcare?
Right. Well, it was involved with all these ancient spiritual wisdom texts, like there's books that go back to like the early teachings of Jesus, and saying that he was using these mushrooms. It's called The Sacred Mushrooms and the Cross, very controversial book by John Marco Allegro. And this guy studied the Dead Sea Scrolls more than probably anybody. And then he's saying there's definitely, whether, I know it's a very controversial book. I'm not saying I believe everything that's in the book, but it's also very dense. It could just be over my understanding. But what it is saying for sure, there's definitely a tie to Jesus and this mushroom, which is pretty cool in itself. This guy studied the Dead Sea Scrolls way more than I ever did. And then it's in the Rig Veda, which is the Hindu text, these hundreds of hymns that the ancient Hindu spiritual masters would drink the soma, this ancient elixir. And the magic ingredient in this ancient elixir, a lot of people think it was the Amanita Muscaria. They say it wasn't a plant and it wasn't a root, but it was from nature. Well, what does that really leave? It could very well be a mushroom. And there's a lot of signs that point to it was the Amanita Muscaria. And so that's the Hindu ancient text. Then there's the Vikings in the Norse mythology that they were using this before battle. Why? Well, because it slowed down time. Time is a construct of the conditioned mind. Again, so these guys are using it, for their own prerogative before battle, but it quieted down the mind and it made them fearless. This is something that we know that this mushroom does with the GABA receptor. And this mushroom has been studied a lot. There's many studies that I could show that it reduces fear, it reduces anxiety almost to null. So why hasn't it been used in, modern healthcare or psychiatry and stuff like that? Well, there's been an agenda, I believe, obviously, that's been put out. These benzoapodrines, these very toxic anti-anxiety medication, is an $18 billion a year industry in itself. How many people do you know, Josh, that are on anti-anxiety medication that feel truly liberated, that come across as the very free and liberated? They're not. And that's not right, in my opinion, So it's here to just give other alternatives, other options. And the very, very cool thing about this mushroom, this product in specific, is it's anti-addictive. It really helps with addiction. So it's like after the 2-month protocol, you don't even need the product anymore. You're seeing things from a different lens. You're seeing things from a soul level. That's what psychedelic means. For most people, it's a trigger word. But what psychedelic actually means is soul revealing. So you start to reveal things to yourself on a soul level. I think that's very powerful. And that's what legal psychedelic microdosing can be so valuable, is just accessing different states of consciousness, which is another word of saying different perspectives, to make optimal choices.
Some of the hit pieces I've read have been around, it's toxic. This mushroom's toxic. And actually, in some forms it is.
Sure.
Right? So
raw form.
Yeah, in raw form it is. But you guys do something amazing, which is so cool. This is why science and spirituality both get a seat at the table, man.
Yes.
Because what you've done with the Quicksome and the ability to have it be a transport medium, like so basically you put it under your tongue, boom, it's in your bloodstream right away. It's amazing. And there's this decarboxylation process that you've talked about. Share with us that, because anybody that's saying it's toxic probably is just not in the knowing that you can make it really healthy and deliver it to the body super easy.
Yes. And that was when I first started researching this mushroom. And it's very interesting to see that all the information or misinformation that's out there about that. You could tell that there's a lot of fear put out there about the mushroom in itself. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. So I've seen this kind of hit pieces type stuff before. And it was like all around fear around this mushroom. And I was like, why is there so much fear around it if, it was talked about with Jesus and the Hindu and the soma and all this kind of stuff? I was like, something isn't adding up here. And like most things in nature, in its raw form, that doesn't mean that it's the way that it's supposed to be ingested, but through science, through experimentation, these shamans in Siberia found that if you heat up the mushroom in a tea, and there's the decarboxylation method there, which basically means heating it up in a tea. Well, the toxic ingredient, what that really means is it just may cause some nausea. Yes, there could be signs of toxicity. If you really ate a lot of the mushrooms, you could have a seizure or something. That's pretty serious. But in micro doses of this, or in using the tea, but especially in microdoses, I'd say the less that you use this mushroom, the better. Like it knows the mushroom itself is innately intelligent. So it knows why you're using it. Are you trying to escape from something? Are you trying to avoid something? So it's like once you build the relationship with the mushroom, it actually starts showing you things about yourself. This is the soul revealing aspect of it. But yeah, so in the decarboxylation method, which is essentially heating it up, it changes the toxic ingredient, which is ibotenic acid. It combines it with the other active ingredient, which in there is muscarine, and it forms a new active ingredient, which is called muscimol. And muscimol is not toxic at all. And in micro doses, it's extremely beneficial for many, many things. And there was a Russian doctor named Baba Masha that did a study with 8,000 people using the Amanita Muscaria on many different types of doses. And they found that the microdoses actually had the best effect. And it was reading this book that really, really, the data speaks for itself. She didn't have any financial agenda. She wasn't selling products. She was just like, she healed herself using the Amanita. And she's like, well, let's let the data speak for herself. So she did a study with 8,000 people, Josh. And out of these 8,000 people, the cure rates on some of the most, toughest things to get through in life, like alcohol addiction, cocaine addiction, PTSD, severe anxiety, depression, but yeah, skin conditions and all this kind of stuff, they were cured. Like we're talking like 75 to 90% cure rates. And then what does that mean? Well, they just didn't have these symptoms anymore. They were gone, So, and that this was all just to show that this Amanita had so many benefits. And that's when I really knew. I was like, okay, wow, the data is there. And it's like, okay, I just need to expose people to the data. So that's another part of it is I could get into, but we're going to study this mushroom and bring the data out there because some people want to see the science. It's more than just podcasting and talking about it.
Well, how perfect is that? That the very people that are like logical minded and need the data, need the science, are the very ones gripping the steering wheel so tight, white knuckling the steering wheel, that they themselves in their discovery process of why they should take it and what's the science, it's their soul wanting them to do it. So it's actually just a soul reckoning for the hard charging A-type people that are like, show me the data, show me the science, show me the hard stuff. That's them convincing themselves in a logical way from the mind down that really the body up is asking them for something different. So I think it's fine. I'm not in judgment of those people. I think being a healthy skeptic is actually a good thing.
Yeah.
As long as you're not shifting so much into skepticism, because skepticism is essentially a philosophy, right? It's a way of being. That the skepticism blocks you from things that could be so healing and so transformational that your own philosophy starts to be self-ending or self-deprecating. And I think it's really interesting because I know that you have a huge portion of your soul that is connected to God, and you're learning more and more about that all the time, right? Like your relationship with God transforms probably every day, definitely every year.
Yeah.
And I love that when you're sharing about going into the cave and the dragon that was there, it was actually just letting go and letting God.
Yeah.
I love that so much. And because you can be a Christian, you can be a Buddhist, you can be any denomination, anywhere. I think that all religion and all philosophies, they're just trying to get to this divine mind. They're trying to access God in the best way that they possibly can. Yet, if we ignore the laws of nature, this new definition of wisdom that I brought forth, if we're fighting against that law of nature so hard, God can't get in.
Yeah.
There's no space for God to get in when we're just fighting the law of nature. Nature is so smart. What have you learned the most from the healing aspect of nature's expression through this mushroom? Like, has there anything that has shocked you? Has there been any transformations that you've had from audience members or customers writing in and saying, oh my God, you're not going to believe this, Alex.
Yeah.
But once I started taking this product, my life transformed. Was there like one big one that you could reflect upon for us?
Yeah, there was many. That's truly my favorite thing about what I do is literally just hearing people's feedback, because you never know how people are going to respond or react to something. And when you bring it out into the market, it's just the one thing that it's the unknown, and you hope for the best, you do your best to make it a great user experience. But it's truly, truly my favorite part of what I do is just hearing the feedback and getting messages from people. And just hearing one, for example, was like someone's being like, I've been stuck in this fear-based mindset for so long. Like it was crippling and I feel free, like just hearing that, I'm like, wow, that's so cool. It's so beautiful. Other person like couldn't sleep and they had really bad insomnia, and they have kids and they got to take, single mom, got to take care of her kids. She's like, I'm finally sleeping again. And it just feels so good to be rested. And like, and there's a lot of feedback I get. People being like, you know what? I go to bed really early now. I can't even stay up and, do what I used to do. It's like, I go to bed early and I get up early. And I know these are all things that the mushroom is doing. It's really, after 3-week protocol, it resets your circadian rhythm. And well, what does that mean? Well, one is there's a natural law of this universe that everything is in rhythm. And well, the sun is a big part of that. The sun goes in this wavelength. And once you tap into the rhythm of the sun, which is, in many beliefs, the God itself is the bringer of all light, the bringer of all life. Without the sun, we'd be doomed. So it's like there's definitely a major incredible power that comes from the sun. So it's like once you're aligned with this rhythm of the sun, I think there's really something there, and you start to actually absorb more light, so that you can share it with others, the people that you love, and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, that was probably the biggest one, Josh, is realizing the alignment with the sun, the light of the creator, and how that plays such a factor. And, we always have the choice whether to look at a screen or phone or a TV or whatever, but like you can choose to look at something that is from God, instead. And that was a big realization in itself. But yeah, there's been many feedback, and that's what continues to like propel me for this, is the feedback.
Do you remember the voicemail that I left you?
Yeah, yours was one of the best too.
When I tried it.
I didn't want to overshare.
This is full stop truth, y'all. So I had a pretty stressful argument with my lady, and I put the dial under my tongue, and I didn't do anything else. I didn't do any breath work or anything. I think I took a walk. And I could feel viscerally in my tissues a release of a program of overwhelm. And it was massive. I don't remember exactly how I told you, but that was the gist of it.
It was an awesome feedback.
And I thought, wow, like if I'm feeling this way, I know that everybody else can feel this way. And you don't have to get high.
Yeah.
This is not like some trip that you're going to go on. I think just to quell anyone's fears, this is not a psychedelic crazy journey. This is a true microdose.
Yes.
And when I look at, because I said, science and spirituality both deserve a seat at the table. I look at Jamie Wheel's hedonic calendaring system. And I've talked about this many times on the podcast, but for y'all that don't know this, Jamie Wheel in Stealing Fire talks about this calendar system where he goes into depth of the frequency of microdosing, macrodosing, and big journeys, as well as on-ramps to accelerate the process in a safe way. So y'all go to that book for the reference point. But the microdosing is a big piece of the hedonic calendaring system. I actually don't even like that word hedonic because the etymology is hedonism.
Right.
I don't really resonate with hedonism. I think there's just a peaceful way of being that we're all looking at.
Yeah.
Maybe hedonism sometimes. Anyways, the point I'm getting at is like when we start to use microdosing in its truest form, which is not trying to escape what we're feeling. You had said that the mushroom, when you start developing a relationship with it, it'll show you things. How do you feel like the mushroom in true microdosing form could be understood by someone that's never done any type of psychedelic, any type of plant-based entheogen? In other words, what's the starting guide for that process where they might start to use this in their life? What's the protocol there?
So good, Josh. So glad you brought this up. I'm a big believer and advocate for microdosing. It's really the small, subtle state change that you get to witness, you get to observe it. And what does that mean? You become the observer of the state change, much like your feedback. And that's what this dialed is designed to do. So it's like, okay, you're feeling a certain way. You're stuck in anxious thought, fear, maybe even panic. You're feeling this way, this lower vibration way. Okay, you take the dialed. Because of the delivery QuickSome technology, it passes your blood-brain barrier in a minute. So within a minute, the active ingredient now is coding your GABA receptor, which is the part of your brain that is causing the anxiety, fear. It's doing what it's designed to do based on your thoughts. So it's like, okay, you coat that, you repair that receptor. So now in a minute, you're not feeling the anxious. There's no more thoughts of fear. There's no more panic. So you get to witness, you get to observe the state change very quickly. And what that does, to your point, is it starts to build a relationship between you and the mushroom, because it's like, wow, this mushroom actually worked. So you start to trust it. And then it's like, oh, you trust the mushroom's like, now that you're showing up with trust, it becomes a relationship. Everything is in relationship. This is what I learned from our friend Aaron Abke. Everything is truly in relationship. So now you're building a relationship with this thing that is divinely created. And it's like, oh, thank you for trusting me, human. Let me show you some other things, And it's like, first, let me get you to sleep better, because you need that, So it gets you to sleep better, gets you to align with the sun, like basic stuff that we've been taken off from because of modernity. But it's like, first, it's going to align you back with the light of the creator. It's pretty awesome. And then it's like, okay, you want to continue using it? Sure. Let me show you some things about yourself that may be getting in the way of what your soul really desires. And that's really cool.
The way you explain that is so cool. And maybe somebody's like, I get it, I resonate with it. And then there's another person that's like, what is he talking about? The mushroom speaks to you. So can you talk to those people? Because they're the ones that needed the most. They're gripping the steering wheel.
Yeah,
right?
For sure. They're gripping the steering wheel. And I get that. And that's part of it is, and I love the way that you said that, is like taking something complicated and simplifying it.
Yeah. Because
we all are very complicated beings, right? We're very multidimensional. Life is
complex, man.
Life is complex. We're multidimensional. There's a physical thing going on, a mental, an emotional, a spiritual, a financial game going on. Then that's just me in my house alone. I'm very complex. As soon as I introduce another human being to the mix, the complexities have amplified tremendously.
AKA intimate relationship.
Exactly. So it's like life is complex. I get that. Okay, so let's simplify it. For the people that are like, what are you talking about? Everything is in relationship, meaning like everything is connected. It's all atoms, really. It's neutrons, protons, electrons. These are they're in a relationship. They're not standalone. They work together. So if everything is made up of those atoms, I think people can understand that so far, right? And they're all in relationship, and everything is essentially connected. Well, how you respond to something or how you react to something is going to play a factor. And the mushrooms are connected innately to nature, maybe more than anything, really. Like they have the oldest, largest, and smartest living organism. So they have their place here. Mushrooms are their own kingdom, like the mineral kingdom, like our friends at Mana. They have the mineral kingdom. There's the mushroom kingdom, there's the animal kingdom, and the plant kingdom. So they all have their own kingdom. Why do you think that is? Well, they're probably here to help us and to show us and to teach us. We're all in relationship together. So wouldn't you rather have a loving relationship with these kingdoms as opposed to a selfish relationship where you want to, there's a big difference energetically. I'm really trying to simplify it here, but if you just think about it simply, like there's a big difference between showing up to a relationship, let's say it's with another human, and wanting to take and keep from them, as opposed to I'm showing up to this relationship so I can give and receive from them. So why wouldn't it be any different with another kingdom? So if you show up to the relationship with the mushroom and saying, hey, I'm going to give you the opportunity to use my vessel. It's taking a ride in your vessel is what this mushroom is doing. I'm going to give you the opportunity to take a ride in my vessel, mushroom. And the mushroom's like, oh, thanks for trusting me with that. In exchange for that, you're going to receive some space, some peace, some wisdom, perhaps.
Well, this is the art form we're practicing, right? We're taking these massive concepts and we're distilling them down. So this is one of the things that I really love to practice as a superpower. It's like, as a podcast, even with our team, we're always like, okay, our superpower is taking these massive things, information and knowledge, and deciphering it down, disseminating it, boiling it down to just the nuggets, just the gold, just the stuff that really moves the needle for us so that we can be this dial that gives us a signal above the noise. And I think when I look at the concept of noise, AKA static, things that distract us, there is no greater showcase of this than warriors who come back from war with shell shock and PTSD. Imagine the static that they're going through just on a daily basis, y'all, of like their prefrontal cortex having no blood, their amygdala being hijacked, their dial in their brain, which is essentially the thing that searches for danger, is being constantly an alarm bell for them. Their reticular activating system. We can go down the road forever about the neurology of what's happening to these men and sometimes women. Give us the real understanding of this mushroom as it pertains to significant trauma like PTSD. What is the real science that we can understand about that?
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up. The first study that we're actually doing with Dialed is a veterans focused study. Because I'm so glad you brought this up. I don't even think you knew this, but we want to show that it's like, if this mushroom, this Amanita Muscaria, this Dialed, can actually help the people that have the most amount of trauma. Like you said, these veterans that went and fought for their country and saw all kinds of, wild stuff. Insane things I couldn't even imagine.
I cannot even fathom the horror that these people have seen.
Literally. So that's who I'm really called to help. For that exact reason. So it's like, okay, if we could show that, the data that it helps the people that have the most trauma. And okay, so how does it do that? Well, it goes and repairs that part of the brain, that GABA receptor. It coats it so that when and how does it do that? Okay, well, it quiets the mind. So when they're stuck in these loops of thought patterns, going back to the trauma, it creates a space around it, and it starts, and in that space, there's an opportunity to shift from the conditioned mind to the divine mind. So that's what's going on. And what it's doing is it's coding the receptor. Okay, that's one part of it. What else is it doing? Well, it's getting them out of their amygdala, like you said, the survival brain, where they were literally in survival, fighting for their lives. It's getting them out of that part of their brain. It's shifting it to the mammalic brain. Mammalic brain is the part of the brain where it thinks about not just about themselves anymore. It starts to think about family. It starts to think about emotional intelligence. It starts to think about community. It's a different part of the brain that most people are actually not even operating in. And myself for a long time as well. So imagine that. It's taking you out of one part of your brain. And it's like, why don't you go and put your energy in this part of your brain? And that's what we're going to show. We're going to show this study. And I'm very excited about that. And we're going to show it on a neuroscientific level as well, like using neuroscience, brain mapping, where we can scan the brain and show, hey, the activity was going on in this part of the brain. Take the Dialed, and because we have the QuickSome technology, it acts very fast. So it's not like you have to wait 45 minutes or an hour if you're in this panic attack or, major PTSD scenario. It's going to act very fast, and we're going to be able to track the brain mapping that show that it's going from the survival brain, beta state essentially, to an alpha state, which is more creative, more productive, or even to a theta state, which is where everybody's wanting to get to, right? So that part's very important for me, is to do the study for that. And then it's like, okay, once we show that we could help people with severe trauma, well, that would indicate to me that we could probably help people that have lesser traumas, but still have traumas, and young men that are struggling with anxiety and comparison and all this kind of stuff on social media. Like, there's a lot of young men that are struggling, and I want to help those young men because those are the future generations.
So good. Trauma is a spectrum. We had Will Reason on the podcast, who I love. He has I believe his company is called Trauma and Somatics. And the on-ramp that he described, and actually a few other people that have been on the show have described this on-ramp of the acceptance curve for somebody with shell shock, or even somebody that's just been through trauma of any kind, right? Because there's capital T trauma, there's lowercase t trauma. Yeah. And yes, some of them are more significant, like sexual trauma or trauma from war. It essentially is convincing the mind, the survival portion of the mind, that someone's not safe. I think that's really the most simplistic way I could describe trauma, is there's a belief encoded neurologically, physiologically, that activates on a framework of however much trauma that has conditioned their nervous system before they actually got to the significant trauma. What I'm saying is, like, I think it's dependent upon someone's constitution of what they've been through before they get to the significant trauma. The people that have been through more trauma and then get really traumatized could possibly have a deep, deep belief that was encoded that they will never be safe.
Totally.
And if I have the belief as a human being that I'm never, ever safe, good luck trying to do anything in life and be successful and have peace. So this is my curiosity. Looking at the lowercase t and the capital T trauma, if someone is doing a true microdose and there's an onboarding, there's actually a first step, because I think a lot of people that have been through significant trauma, they fear a deep ayahuasca journey.
Yeah.
They fear a ketamine session.
Yeah.
They fear iboga, which, oh my God, iboga is like a freaking Tyrannosaurus Rex of a journey, right?
Yeah.
Or even like a 5-MeO, the frog medicine. Like, these things can be actually in the wrong space, really re-traumatizing to the very people that need help healing their trauma. So I think this is in my experience, I wonder how you feel about this, I think this is a really beautiful starting place. If someone has curiosity bubbling up of like, hey, I have been through significant trauma. I am working with a coach. I am working with a professional. To me, this seems like just that little crack in the door where you can like undo a little bit of your stress. And then you're afforded more capacity to exercise your power of choice. What do you make of that?
I love that, Josh. I'm a big subscriber in that. I'm all about microdosing. And yes, I have done many larger doses of psychedelics and plant medicines and all that kind of stuff. But I'm not advocating for that. I don't think that's for everybody. I think that you have to be called for that. And that there's a true calling. Like, there's something that comes into your life that says, hey, go here. And you're like, what the heck is that about? But anyway, microdosing, that is the beauty of it, is it's micro. Like, we're talking, there's 5 1,000ths of a gram in this dialed product, right? It's little adjustments, like you said, to peek behind the veil. So it's not alarming. It's not shocking to your system, like some of these other psychedelic tools, which can be wonderful, but can also be jarring, especially if they're done in the wrong spaces or with the wrong people. It's a whole thing. I've had probably some of the most traumatic experiences of my life taking psychedelics too far.
Same.
Right? So it's like, I get it. And
I've been traumatized by ayahuasca. Oh
me
my
too.
God.
I was traumatized by mushrooms when I did it in the wrong way. You know, so it's like, but in that beating was the blessing, because they showed me that microdosing is the answer. It's less is truly more. Less is more. And that's the way. It doesn't have to be taken to the extreme. So yeah, all this to say, microdosing is the starting point for people that have their white knuckling it through life, and they're like, yeah, I don't have the time or the space to go and do ayahuasca in the jungle or the ketamine journey. Sure, I get it. That's fine. But do you maybe have the space to try something that's so micro, just to see, try something new, try a different perspective on, like your perspective has got you where it is now.
Yeah.
Maybe it's time to just try on a different lens.
If I compared inward journey, psychedelic journeying, or let's just say entheogenic journeying to exercise, this is literally going for a walk for your health, for your psychedelic self.
Yeah.
You would never go into a gym and try to squat 500 pounds if you've never squatted before?
great example.
Why would you go to an ayahuasca journey if you've never meditated, you've never been in a float tank, you have no practice of self-care at all? You are get ready, buckle up, Buttercup, because you will get fucked up in that situation. So I think this is a really cool analogy in this framework of simplifying big things. Taking dialed and taking the Amanita into your system is like going for a walk spiritually rather than going to a massive journey and recognizing that you're the void. You know, like that's just way too much for people to even comprehend. Like I have been significantly personally injured, but there was this, I was in the shower this morning. I was telling you before we hit record, I was in the shower, y'all. And I was thinking about my intention with my friendship, my brotherhood with Alex, and like really wanting to put out the most honest conversation I possibly could. And it came from where I am in my life. I'm getting beaten right now in the most beautiful way. So there's this blessing that's coming from this beating. Yeah. And the beating is actually me coming up right full circle, full stop to the mirror of all the things I believe about myself or life that disconnect me from that which created me.
Amen, brother.
And that's the blessing in this whole thing. Now, I can sit here and admit to y'all that I am not through the journey yet. But when I have tools like this in my arsenal that allow me to center and be with myself and connect with that which created me, my creator, I really love the phrase creator because it's non-denominational. Like we're all here, therefore we have been created. So there's this divine mystery that I'm in constant imagination, fascination, sometimes bewilderment of, you know, like what is going on with this life? The
As
real,
it should be.
Yes. There's spirituality and science at the table. There's also mystery sitting right over there. They're all welcome at this table.
Amen.
And the table can hang with it because what I was mentioning and really what I'm wanting to flesh out here is when I start to ingest things that have super powerful intelligence, then it awakens intelligence inside of me that I potentially could not have accessed before.
Yeah.
And I think that is a really beautiful way to get through, quote, a beating in one's life. So if y'all are going through a breakup, a divorce, an injury, or just you're having a psychic malady of some sort, it's a beautiful way to start. I would recommend this over almost anything else. If you have trouble meditating, if you're not into breath work, if the thought of laying in a float tank scares you, like all these things, I get it. I totally respect that. This is for literally anyone who wants to start the journey, to access consciousness, to access this power of choice. And I think it comes, man, and I wonder how you feel about this. I think it comes through the beating. We have to take beatings in life. I'm not saying that we have to physically be beaten, although sometimes that's what happens. But it's this blessing that's on the other side of the beating that really is where wisdom is given. That's where the wisdom is given. And I think to quote another piece of the book that I was reading, it's this, I love this book. It's like so near and dear to my heart right now.
The Napoleon Hill book?
Napoleon Hill. This is a quote from Napoleon Hill's book, y'all. It's exactly what Alex and I are sharing here. Adversity and failure are nature's universal languages through which she impacts wisdom to those who are ready to receive it. Just let that land for a moment.
Yeah.
To those who are ready to receive it. So what do you believe makes us ready to receive it?
Well, I believe that, you know, in the beating, so, you know, since we're calling it that, there's a lesson, right? And then in order to receive the blessing, which is on the other side of the lesson, one must go through the lesson. That's why we came here, I believe, in this earth school. And in the earth school, just like how I was when I was in school, I like to gamify things. So I look at it as a game because it's more fun. Because if we take it,
were you like a super video game guy? Like you really went deep? Like you wear the headset and talk to people?
No, I never went that far.
Okay.
But I just liked games.
Yeah.
Like I like video games, of course. That was part of it. But I like to gamify everything when I was a kid. It just made things more fun. And I got to see, like, you know, the seriousness of life and the playfulness of life. And I was like, wow, it's just way more fun when I gamify things. So that's just the way that I gamified this earth school. So I look at it as that. It makes it more fun for me. And not necessarily in a competitive way, but in a more of a cooperation way. Like we're playing this game together. And that makes it more fun. So yeah, I see it as like in the video game or whatever game you want to choose that you resonate with. But there's lessons in the game, and the lessons could be in the form of a beatdown, you know, an emotional beatdown. But hey, in that beating, there's pain, but that pain is, what is that pain? If you really look at it, well, it's the release of this program or this weakness or this thing that we decided to store inside of ourselves. Something happened in our life, call it a trauma, and instead of letting it go, because we just didn't know how to do that, we held on to it. And it was like, and then in that holding on, there creates a resentment or it shouldn't have been like this. You know, it's a resistance to what actually happened, as opposed to this happened so that I could learn from this and grow from that. So we store these blockages, these resentments inside of us. So it's like, that's what I think the pain is. So how does one move on from that? Well, you do the opposite of what we've been doing, which is the doing, is constantly doing. I'm going to do my way out of this. So it's like, okay, what does that mean, Alex? You learn to relax. You know, most people don't know how to relax. So it's like, relax, truly give yourself the time and space to relax and release this pain. So how do you release the pain? Just embrace it. See that it's there. Allow yourself to witness it and be like, it's okay. I'm ready to let this go. And that I think has been the big key for me, Josh, is just learning to relax and release whatever's there truly once and for all. And just being like, yeah, I could go. And it wants to come up. It literally wants to come up. And we just have to learn to relax and release, R&R, I call it. And in that, it's very freeing. So yeah, that's what comes up with me for the lessons and the beatings.
I just love it. I just love everything you said. And, you know, in this same construct of spirituality and science at the table, I'll share the impact of what you shared from both lenses. So in the scientific lens, there is Dr. Hawkins' work as one of the founders of really self-empowering thought in the world of psychology. I mean, I've mentioned him more on this podcast than probably any other teacher I've ever had. And I think where anyone can go is when we're starting to feel something, just be in honesty about what is there. Just be in honesty about it.
Yeah, so good.
He developed the scale, the frequency scale. And so when we're in these survival paradigms, I believe it's 20 through 400 or 300 possibly. To get to the higher frequencies, we actually can't skip. We must, well, this is the way that the creator designed us. We have to actually go through grief and sadness and anger and rage and jealousy and denial, and then acceptance, and then courage, and then willingness is above courage, right? The willingness to change scientifically, not even spiritually, is above all the feelings that we don't want to feel.
So cool.
And every single time in my life I have ever not wanted to feel something, and I've been in massive resistance to feel something at the survival paradigm, it just infects me deeper. It fucking won't let go. It's like when you're swimming in the ocean, if there was an octopus that grabbed your leg and you pretended it's not there, it's just going to suck you down. There's just no way to get away from it.
You can't escape it.
That's the scientific lens. Now, on a spiritual lens, I would say that everything you're saying is right. Yes. And I also believe that certain people have certain karmic constitutions based on the mystery, because it's not a real science. It's the mystery of epigenetic transfer of emotions and trauma and beliefs. I really believe that if someone comes into the world, a good example of this would be the research that's been done about in utero when the mother is going through massive stress. And I know this because I was born less than 5 pounds. I was put in an incubator for 2 weeks. I had a lot of birth trauma that I'm still unpacking, right?
Sure.
And what happens to a fetus when they're growing in the mother's womb in utero, when the mom's going through massive stress or when she has insane things going on, arguments and even financial stress, that is actually being encoded through the placenta into the neurology and the neural tree of the child. And so then that child gets born into the world with hypervigilance. And that was something that I was at war with forever. Why am I so hypervigilant? Why can't I just try? I was angry at the very thing that was asking for peace. And so the spiritual, my stomach is like talking here right now. It's crazy. Did you hear that?
That's
y'all. My stomach just gurgled super hard when I said that. So this is real.
That's real.
My body's talking to me. The very thing that I was angry at was actually just encapsulated inside of it was the solution for me to feel it first and foremost, which is what you're sharing. And then go through the Hawkins scale and not skip any fucking steps.
Yeah.
Because every single time, whether it's here in the 3D or inside myself, I try to skip a step or like do a hack or a shortcut.
Yeah.
Even with AI, I'm like committed to learning it in integrity. I don't need to make AI this massive shortcut. I want to be in integrity with AI so I can be in the OI like you talked about.
Yeah.
So that's the spiritual and the scientific. The mystery part is just honoring all of it.
Yeah.
Because if we don't honor all of it, then what are we even doing here? So what comes up for you when I share this with your life's mission, with your life's purpose? How is this understanding of both the mystery, the science, and the spirituality? How do all those concepts or those philosophies and understandings, how have you integrated those as you're driving the mission of eons?
I love that. That was so well put. They're all in relationship, all of them. And in that, all those together, the spiritual, the scientific, the mystery, that's the relationship of wisdom for me. And if you look back at the ancient texts, they will talk about this stuff, right? And it's, for me, what comes up is like, we get to do this work. We get to do the work in the game. We get to embrace the pain so we can grow and go up the Hawkins scale, so that when we create a new life, as a child, they are not getting these spiritual baggage passed down to them, like you said, with the hypervigilance and all this kind of stuff.
Sure.
So it's up to us. It's with great power comes great responsibility. As many creators, children of God, well, it's up to us to do the work. There is no bypassing. And we get to do the work. That's the reframe is like, we get to grow. We get to experience every level of the consciousness scale. There's no skipping. So that's what comes up for me. And it's all just, we get to. And that's the way I look at it, Josh, is like, if I'm lucky, I get 24 hours in a day. So it's like making the best of those 24 hours. And it starts with doing the inner work. And the more that I do the inner work, the outer world reflects that truly, as within, so without. I heard that code so many times growing up. It was just a concept, right? It was just a platitude, like you said. But in the platitude is the real, there's wisdom there. Once you really, sort that out for yourself, it all starts within. It truly, truly does. Every spiritual master is pointing to that. So I just keep going within. And the outside world will reflect that. That's the relationship that I'm seeing develop, and it's truly a gift to be able to do that. There's no bypassing, and if one tries to bypass, you won't be able to. You'll have to come back and do it again.
There's more suffering.
There's more suffering
in the perceived shortcut. It actually turns into a fucking long cut. It turns into such a long cut. And gosh, I fought being a podcaster for like 3 years before I started. Because I was just like, I'm not ready. Who am I? I was believing so much bullshit that was actually all perfect.
Yeah.
It was all part of it.
Yeah.
Because here I am 13 years later.
Yeah.
And I look back on that version of myself with fondness and kindness and understanding. And God, he was really lost. He was really lost, man. And I think the amount of pain that version of Josh was feeling at that time, he was literally just scrapping, trying to get out of a hole. He would have done anything, almost like I would never kill anyone or consciously harm anyone. But I definitely was a taker. Sure. When I was deep in my pain, I was a taker. Now when I'm deep in my pain, I'm a seeker. It's just different.
Yeah.
I'm just transformed in that way. When I'm in pain, I'm not looking to take from someone else. When I'm in pain, I'm seeking wisdom for my pain. To quote the outwitting the devil. So can you look back on the earlier version of Alex?
Yeah.
When he was in his deepest, darkest moment?
Yeah.
And can you speak to him right now?
Yeah. Well, Alex's deepest, darkest moments.
What was that for you?
That would have been really stuck in those three things that I mentioned earlier, like those three programs that really had a control on me, and food was one that I really struggled with. As you know, that might not sound like that bad to people.
Oh,
but
no, I get it. I used to be 280.
Yeah,
I get it.
Me too.
Food is a drug.
Food is a drug, and it's the most socially encouraged drug.
It is such a drug.
And it's
same with beer.
Yeah, and it's the best at it's the easiest coping mechanism to not feel, right? So essentially what I'm getting at is like, I wasn't feeling, I was constantly doing. So I was constantly bypassing the consciousness scale. Well, what happens in that when you keep doing that and you keep trying to take the shortcuts is eventually your soul or God or the universe or whatever is like, insert crisis here, because there's no more shortcuts. And then it's like, now you have a crisis to deal with. It's no more.
Oh, yeah.
Then in that crisis, you really get the opportunity, actually. It's a blessing. It's a lesson and a blessing, but you get the opportunity to really look within and make changes. So I got to make changes. And, then the shortcuts started again. I didn't want to feel these uncomfortable feelings, right? So it was lust and sex and women was the next bypassing thing, and that became a whole thing. And, still only worked that out very recently, to be honest.
Where were you when you had this darkest?
Oh,
where were you? How old were you?
at the time, it didn't actually seem that dark.
Looking back now,
this was probably when I was like 34 years old.
Same.
Yeah.
Same exact age.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And then it's really just what I was really doing in all three of those things. There was the material goods, the food, and the sex, but it was all consuming. Literally, it was all consuming. It was consuming me. And what I mean, like consuming me, it was like consuming my essence. Because when you're consuming, it's the opposite of creating. You're taking. Right, I was constantly taking and keeping, looking for things outside of myself so I wouldn't have to feel.
Yeah.
What's the opposite of that? Well, giving and receiving. So now it's like, okay, I stopped consuming to become the creator of my life instead. Instead of relying on outside circumstances or things or relationships or whatever, it's like, no, I'm creating my life now. And in doing that, I actually need so little. Like, I barely, I have one meal a day. I fast 24 hours a day. And the only thing that I put in my system is the mushrooms and the minerals. And I create a relationship with them, let them guide me. But in the fasting, you realize like you don't really need anything. It's wild and when you don't need anything, well, what does that mean? You have everything. And when you have everything, you can attract anything because you can only attract where you're at. So it was really this gigantic, merry-go-round to figure this out of like, okay, all this stuff that you're chasing and consuming and has you on a leash is really the thing that's stopping you from like going within and facing that dragon. And on the other side of the dragon is the gold. And what does the gold really mean? It's like liberation, man.
So good.
Yeah.
When I was in corporate America hell and I was doing the quote safe route because I had this older version of myself at 31. I stopped personal training. I went into software sales because I was like, I'll put my dream in a box over here of having a voice and speaking my truth and learning about me and God and the world. And I'll just put that we'll just tuck it in the corner.
Yeah.
And then
soul doesn't like that.
No. And then on the other side, I was like, and I'll make money and maybe one day I'll get to it. Because I didn't believe in myself. I wasn't trusting life. And every day when I woke up, it would be almost like, in the stock market, they have those ticker tapes that like say the valuations.
Yeah, of course.
Every morning when I wake up, I remember I was living in Encinitas and I had bought like an Acura and I had all the things that were just quelling my soul's voice. and I look up at the ceiling and like every day there would literally be sometimes I could see it, sometimes I could just feel it, a ticker tape, and it would say there's more to life than this.
Oof.
And it would be every day I would feel it. So talk about like carrying around a wagon and how stressful and exhausting that was. I got to this point where insert chaos, like you said, I got fired from the corporate job. I put my mom in a mental home and I broke up with a woman I thought I was going to be with. And it happened in like 6 months.
Boom.
And that's where the podcast was born from. So the beating encodes the blessing.
Yeah.
And I really want y'all to feel this, because this is not just Alex and I like waxing poetic. Like these are real heartfelt moments that are being shared, and everybody has their own. The biggest, in my opinion, source of fear is that which our parents, grandparents, and lineage have been taught that they unconsciously pass on to us. And the vehicle of that fear many times is through what's called a psyop. And we were chatting on IG a couple days ago, and we send each other clips, as I'm sure everybody does. And you're like, I have a psyop that's way bigger than anything you've ever heard. What is that psyop? Because we're talking about the mechanism of fear that encodes people into a program that they're not the player one of, which is so sad. And I've been there, and I'm sure we'll go through moments where I'm there again and I'll learn how to get out of that. What is the biggest psyop that people don't know about?
Yeah, there's many psyops, as we all know.
And maybe define a psyop for people that don't know.
Psychological operation, so it's an operation designed to psychologically entrap you into a narrative or a belief system so that you're under control or a spell, if you will. So that's essentially what it is, what I gather. And there's many of them, there's many of them that we could rhyme off, but I'd say the biggest of them all is the psyop that you are not divinely connected to God internally within yourself. And once you realize that, once one realizes that the Creator actually lives within you, every single one of you out there listening, the Creator is in you right now, just waiting to be tapped into. People, they could second guess that, but try it out for size, because the world, the outside world has people looking outside of themselves to create a relationship with God or the Creator. And in that, it leads them down so many paths of destruction and pain and suffering and all this kind of stuff, which is all part of it, because it's just getting you to look back at the last place that you would ever actually look, which is within yourself. And once you honor that and just create that, that worship to look within, worship essentially means to pay attention to what's within. Everything is shown to you. Like there's nothing I could say to you, Josh, or anybody listening that you don't actually know deep within yourself.
That's why it feels so good when we hear it.
Exactly. It's already there.
Yeah.
We already are divine beings. We have divinity within ourselves, and that humanness is divine. It's in the name, human being. Okay, what does that mean? Well, the human is our, our creation, made in his image, made in his imagination. Basically, he imagined this human being, but the being is the aliveness, God is being. Everything that has the Creator in it is being. It's the beingness. It's the I am. So I think that's the biggest psyop, and that's what it's all designed to get us to do, is to look at the last place that we would ever actually look, which is within ourselves. And once one realizes that God lives within you, you are unlimited. You are unleashed. Anything is truly possible.
I'm just letting that sit for a moment. I was seeing a picture as you were talking, which is then something's good. And I was visualizing during a workout or a sauna or even like a heavy breath work session, anytime that I'm doing that, if I can have a overlay or an intention that, hey, by me doing this, I'm practicing being closer to God. And have that as a pure intention. Like if that's the overlay and that's the lens, whether it's a walk, a workout, a sauna session, whatever, taking an entheogen, like, will this bring me closer to God? And if the answer is yes, go for it. If it's not, this is how simple it is, right?
So simple.
Now, just because it's simple doesn't mean it's easy to
Correct.
to do all the time. we live in modernity with lots of hooks and lots of like girls with thongs on Instagram. And even for the women out there, you're being trained in ways that I can't even fathom. And being a woman's hard. So is being a man at times. So what I'm saying is that if we can just use that as a decision-making faculty, is what I'm about to do, the food, the water, the connections, the conversation, is it bringing me closer to God? If the answer is yes, then go for it. But yet the answer, the ability to answer that question can't even be there if there's not already a pre-existing relationship with God. In other words, if the lens is covered with mud, then I can't see through it. And then I'll never know. And many souls, it breaks my heart, many people get so locked into that reptilian self, that lower self, that they never make it out, man. It's freaking heartbreaking. They're victim. This is why Skid Row exists. These are lost souls, right? These are people that they get to the bottom. So hopefully, if you're here with us, you're watching, you're listening, you're sharing this podcast with somebody who you can sense is headed that path. Do you have any stories or people in your life that were profoundly changed when they started to clean off the mud of the lies, where they could finally connect with God again? I know for yourself it's there, but is there like a family member or a friend or just somebody that you know, when they started to actually form a real, honest relationship with the God in themselves and the God that created them, that they transformed?
Well, I saw it firsthand with my sister, and I love my sister. She's amazing. She's an amazing young woman. She's always been a blessing in my life. But I did, I saw her as very much of a woman of the Matrix world, like she was a career woman and maybe buying into feminism a little bit, maybe not even knowing it, but, still very innocent as well. I want to say, if she's watching, like she's an amazing young woman. But all this to say, I saw the light of the Creator touch her, like she was touched when she started shifting her perception, her attention towards God, the Creator, and I never, my sister was not a religious person, either was I at the time. I was more spiritual, more new age stuff, plant medicine stuff. And she was more atheist, I would say. I don't know what her relationship was, but she never talked about anything like that. And then she started dating this guy who was Christian Orthodox, and that was her portal into God, and I'm not saying I agree with everything Christian Orthodox and all that. I have my own views. That's a different topic. But I will say that I saw her touched by God, and that was very visible for me. And I was like, wow, okay, she shifted her attention towards something bigger than herself, her career, her this, and there was a light around her that I had never seen. She was always a wonderful woman, but that was one that really stands out,
What was the light?
It was literally like an aura, like an auric light, that I could see around her. And it was like this angelic thing. And I was like, wow, it was so much that it got me to really dive into Christianity and all this kind of stuff, which I had my own experience with. We could save that for another time. But it was awesome. And it was just really, whatever the path is, whether it's Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism, plant medicine, whatever it is, like it's really going towards that light of the Creator is what I believe it is, and I love the word, the Creator as well. Like, and all this stuff, it's exactly that. These are just words. These are just signposts pointing to what is. Like the word God is obviously just a word. It's so limiting, right? It can't encompass what it is to be the ineffable, but it can point you in that direction to go and look, I believe, where it's within. Yeah.
So good. Beware of false prophets has been spoken in many religious texts, not just the Bible.
Yeah.
And I remember Andrew Tate was being interviewed once, and he's like, the interviewer was saying, so you found this relationship with God? And Andrew Tate's like, yeah. I think Andrew Tate is kind of a role player like a David Goggins, where they might help somebody for a moment, but if you attach your philosophy to being that type of person, you're fucked.
All these religions and, spiritual texts, they're all pointing back to love. And that was like the big reveal for me. So it's like you could have all the wisdom, but if you don't have love, like it's you're still missing a big part of it.
Jung said life starts at 40 and everything else is just practice.
Yeah, I love that.
And Hill
Yeah.
says that when he was speaking to the devil in his book, he said that really all wisdom is ascertained and embodied after 40. And before then, we are so busy organizing it and trying to understand it.
I relate
so they're
to
both,
that
they don't
so
know
much.
each other. I find it fascinating. And I wonder how you find this too. When we get mystics and ancient masters and even contemporaries, like they're all saying the same thing, but yet they don't know of each other. Their lives were so divided by age that there's no way they could have communicated. Yet they're saying these concepts. I think if we can pull wisdom from that and paying attention to what many people are saying, then there are things that are just so unequivocally true that they stand the test of time.
Totally.
And if in the beginning was the Word and the Word was love, then God is love.
God is love.
That's
yeah.
actually everything. But I say that with the ultimate respect and softness and sacredness.
Yeah.
If love is all there is and love is God, the only way that love could know itself is by experiencing its opposite. And this is the part that is so uncomfortable. So if the opposite of love is fear, then fear only knows love and love only knows fear when they're in duality. But yet there is a singularity. Like there's if everything comes from one place, then the only way that it knows itself is to know its opposite. I remember on a podcast once, I was a 3-part series that I did with Paul Chek called All Is God.
Wow.
And he was asking me all these questions and he said, well, if this is true, if love is all there is, and if we're this 0-point field uniquely expressing itself as consciousness, what do you think about God? And I said, well, does God ever get lonely? And it was such a divine moment because he was so surprised by my answer. He was like, ha, yes. And that's why God created us. God created all that is because God wanted family. God wanted to experience God's self in unlimited ways.
Amen.
We will never be able to understand where God comes from, ever.
Yeah.
And it's not something that I'm even interested in answering because if I knew the answer to that, this would just obliterate.
Yeah,
I would just unplug from the matrix and there'd be no meaning. Right? I'd be over. I'd be in the void.
Game over.
So how do we simplify this understanding of how to dance and live and be in this world?
Oh, so good.
You were a teacher at some point in your life and you got this really divine code about how to simplify the concept I'm bringing forth. What is that?
Yeah. So I was a teacher. I was 24 years old and I went back to aviation college and I got my teacher's degree so that I could teach the course that I just actually graduated from. So I was 24, I was teaching 20-year-old kids. It was pretty cool. I was a young teacher and I loved it. I was loving what I was doing, which is another code in itself for anybody that's watching, is like, just find something you love and just do it, and that is like vocation. It is literally bringing love out to the world and things will open up for you. So that was a big realization for me and it opened up so many doors. But yeah, the code that I got, it was literally like you said earlier, Josh, it was one of those codes that, you hear the information, the knowledge, and it landed and I could literally feel it reprogramming myself. I was like, wow, that is major wisdom. And it was by Malcolm X. And he said, intelligence is taking something complicated and making it simple. And ignorance is taking something simple and making it complicated. And with that, I was like, wow, that's so key. All I really have to do as a teacher, because I was teaching aviation, and aviation can be really complicated. There's a lot of stuff going on, especially when I would get into the cockpit with the student and they'd see all these gauges and, throttles and pressures and all this kind of stuff. They were very overwhelmed. So I was like, okay, how do I take something complicated and make it simple? And that became my whole mindset. And that translated into, of course, aviation, but into the business world and into making products and, and then eventually into psychedelics. Because you go into psychedelics, you go to these realms, you experience these wisdoms, but how can you share it with someone so that they can actually understand, so that there's value, So that was a big part of it, was that code in specific. But And to bring it all back around with what you're saying with love, and light is like, look at it like the sun, we were just talking about this. The sun is shining on everything like God, it doesn't care who you are, what you are, every single day. It just shows up and it shines with love. But the sun can't shine on itself, right? So it sends out all these sun rays, right? And we are those sun rays so that it can experience itself shining on each other, lighting up each other with love. So that's where it came up for me when you said that. And we're just talking about the sun, it's really so simple, but it's so powerful.
It's so good. Our mutual friend Luke Story turned me on to a passage from Hawkins, and he said, no matter what, the sun is always shining above the clouds.
Yeah.
And it's really powerful to remember that in a moment of beating or in a moment of pain, that, to quote the Bible, this too shall pass. And to quote many kings, I think there's been a multitude of kings that have hung on to that. And whether you're a queen or a king of your kingdom, or whether you're a queen or a king in training, that passage and these words of wisdom that are so potent, that they truly, truly, truly span the test of time. There are just certain phrases. Is there a phrase, or is there something that just makes your soul feel the ultimate source of peace? Is there a phrase or a word section of wisdom that you love the most?
The words that I've been devoting my attention to as much as I can, Josh, is so simple. But there's two sets of words. I'll say them both. One is really the I am. I believe I am is like the password for this divine game that we're playing. And it'll open up any door, because that I believe is the name of God. And, the Bible references this many times. That's my reference point for it, is, Jesus says, before Abraham was, I am. Is he saying that Jesus was there before Abraham? No, he's saying before Abraham was, I am. The name of God was there. I am. I am presence. What is I am presence? It's the beingness. It's that eternal presence, right? And Jesus goes on to say many profound things with the I am, especially in the book of John. I am the truth, the way, and the life. But is he saying Jesus is, like, as the man, as the deity, as the reincarnate? Or is he saying I am the truth, the way, the life? God is always first person present tense. That's what I go back to again, is the creator is within you. So once you align with the I am presence, you're really aligning with the beingness of God. And it brings you back to, like you said earlier, you are not only the author of your story, the creator of your story, you are the protagonist as well. You are that I am, and everybody is that I am. That's the cool thing about it. And that's what Jesus is saying, is not just saying I am exclusively, like it's just Jesus that is this thing. And I think that's the misconception. Like, no, God is not exclusive. It can't be exclusive. If we're all children of God. We all have the creator within. So the words that I've been really, really devoting my energy to, my attention to as much as possible, is I am, with whatever I'm being. And in that, it's been incredibly liberating.
That is the ultimate code. So for the women listening, maybe some of you will get this. For the men listening, maybe more of you will get this. I don't know. But if you played video games at all, then you would know it's BA select start that would give you like unlimited lives. I think it was Contra or something.
Yeah, Contra.
That's like in my mind. It's a code. It is the ultimate. I'm not going to say the word cheat code, because it's not.
Yeah,
it's not a cheat because it exists, right?
If
it exists and it's in integrity, and the coders of the game, the programmers put it in there, then it's not a cheat. It's actually just a code. And this is why I love what you brought forth in my life. I think it was like 2 years ago, where you were like, it's a code. And I'm like, what is he talking about? What the hell does he mean, this code shit? But now I get it. The ultimate code that unlocked for you was that it's already there. You just weren't using it.
Correct.
The code. Can you say the code in one sentence so that people can use it? This is so powerful.
The I am presence?
Yes.
The I am code? If I had to summarize
Put the code in a sentence or two.
Okay, well, think of it like a triangle. This is the best way I could do it. Like the Holy Trinity, if you will, and just try to open your mind to this. But like there's God, which is just a word, but it represents God. God, and the other corner of the triangle is love. We've already established this. God is made up of love. Love is made up of God. And in the other triangle, it's the I am. The I am is the beingness of love. You are being love. That is the whole point of this existence, is just to be love and love everything. Love life. Love your neighbor as yourself. Love, just if you just loved life, you're in relationship with that. Life will love you back. Life is God. So that's kind of the Holy Trinity that I see. I have it here tattooed. It's the Holy Trinity of that is, I'm not doing Masonic symbols. I'm just doing the Trinity here. So people are like, he's doing symbols.
He's not a Freemason.
I'm not a Freemason. That's a whole other story, by the way. I could get into that later, but they tried to get me into the Freemasons years ago.
Okay, well, you're not going to drop that bomb and have us not express it. So now y'all have the code.
Yeah.
Now we're going to learn about
the code.
Now we're going to learn from Alex about a potential onslaught to his soul and how you said no to Freemasonry with the lens of us understanding the psyops and the fear programming that's installed, which is why your product exists in the first place. So I promise I'll tie it back around. Y'all stick with us. Like, this is really important. How did this occur that they wanted you to join the Freemasons?
Yeah, it's pretty wild. I was moving up. I never shared this publicly either. And, I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid. I'm not suicidal too, by the way. So like, I'm just sharing this was my experience and I have nothing negative to say about them per se. This is just my experience. But as I was moving up the ladder of success in the matrix, so to speak, I had a really big company that was emerging in the cannabis space. Cannabis was a big thing at the time, and it was getting a lot of attention, and it was a whole movement at that point in time. We're talking like 2017, 2018. I was getting notoriety, all this kind of stuff, and I was approached by a older gentleman in his 50s, and he casually brought it up. Oh, you ever hear about Freemasonry? I was like, yeah, I have heard about Freemasonry, and I'd done a bit of research at the time, but not a lot, and I was very curious. And, at that time in my life, I was very interested in continuing to move up the ladder of success, so I was like, yeah, if I could be using this network to increase my positioning and my business and make more money and stuff like that. Yeah, that sounds really interesting. And he's like, yeah, that's kind of what this is all about.
So the material was guiding you.
The material was guiding me for sure.
Yeah.
And that was something I was very much into at that time. I was very much on that leash of the conditioned mind, material goods, making money. And I'm not saying those things are bad or negative. It's just if they have you on a leash, if they control you versus you control them. And that's where I was. So anyway, long story short, I had 13 meetings with a Freemason organization, a lodge, a big lodge that had been around for a long time. I had 13 meetings with them spread out over a year. And all kinds of different meetings. They were very much checking me out, asking me lots of questions. I got to ask them some questions, but a lot of it wasn't revealed. And it was very interesting how it all unfolded. But I will say this, like, I actually wasn't impressed at all with what I had seen. Like the people that I was meeting with and stuff like that, very unimpressive. Like I was like, where's the wisdom keepers here? Where's the gatekeepers? Where's the guys with the codes? I don't know, very unassuming guys, and I don't mean that to be disrespectful. I was just like, I thought there would be like some pretty impressive people. Definitely did not see that at all. Yeah. And there was one guy that had some codes for sure. And then anyway, I got up to the point where I was approved. I passed whatever test, answered the right questions along those 13 different types of meetings. And I was supposed to be inaugurated. I was supposed to have an induction ceremony. And that day that I was supposed to be, brought in officially, my body was just saying no. It was like, it wasn't allowing me even really to go. And I just like, I I had no desire to go. And it was like this major contradiction to something that was living within me. And yeah, I remember just messaging the guy that I originally had the first meeting with. And I'm like, yeah, it doesn't feel right, you know? And he's like, okay, well, if you change your mind, you can, you know, you could join another lodge or this kind of stuff. And I was like, yeah, no, it doesn't feel right, da-da-da. And I just turned it down, you know? And I'm really glad that I did.
You would not be sitting here.
No, for sure.
There is no way eons would exist.
No, that's for sure.
When you said your body was screaming at you, this is really big.
Yeah.
There's two paths one could go.
Yeah.
When somatic intelligence turns on the alarm. Sometimes somatic intelligence, or I guess you could say intuition, is giving you an alarm bell that's actually not intuition. It's like instinct of fear. It's very confusing. I'll do my best way to simplify this too. So we have this signal that's going off in the body, whether it's sweating hands or nervousness or upset stomach. And a lot of times this can actually be a reenactment of a trauma that's happened in our life that is potentially blocking us from something good. And then on the other side, sometimes that intuition can be really pure, and it can be this deciphering mechanism that's so much more intelligent than the mind. Like the body knows, the unconscious self, the one connected through the soul to God, with God, knows that's not the right path. They can be very confusing if someone hasn't done the work. And at that age, you had done some work, but not the amount of work you've done now.
Not even close.
How did you discern between instinct and intuition in that moment?
Yeah. At that time, I just listened to my body without even really knowing that was a thing. But I love this topic because this is something I want to explore more and learn how to fine tune more as well. Is like, what is intuition versus resistance? That I'm starting to get clearer on. Like resistance to me is a voice in the head that's trying to come up with all these excuses not to do something. And the more that I do the opposite of whatever that voice, the opponent says, doors open and major things unlock. And that one I'm really familiar with. But this I find dialed actually helps me tap more and more into my intuition. And what I mean by that is like usually when an opportunity presents itself or there's an option to do something, I feel like an immediate pulse of a yes. It's like, and like sometimes my spine even like erects like this. And it's like, whoa, there's an alignment and it's like a yes. And I'm pulled towards it. And then sometimes it's like there's just this no sensation of it's like, my body doesn't want to do that at all. And that's where I want to explore this with you, Josh, and hear your wisdom on it. Like, how does one realize like the no of the body? Is it a no because it's afraid, or is it because it's more of an intuitive knowing?
I like that you threw it back on me because I have the same quest of understanding. The way that I could describe it would be yes and. So in all spiritual teachings, they essentially say that God only hears yes, right? That's why Matthew 11:24 is so important, right? Like the way that you pray is actually very important. If you're praying for strength, God's going to give you experiences that'll knock you on your. If you're praying for grace, if you're saying, God, I'm grateful for these resources, and if it's in your will, God, here is who I'm going to serve. Here is what I am thankful for. If it is in your will, who I'm going to serve. I've learned how to pray much better because that is an energetic signal that I'm sending out that gives me a feedback loop of understanding. So when it comes to intuition and instinct, if my body is screaming at me, I actually do need my mind and my soul to understand if this is based on past trauma or if this is my somatic intelligence warning me. And it's different every time. So that's why I'm saying it's a yes and. I wish there was like some template overlay where I could say in every situation, this is how you use your intuition and this is how you understand it's your instinct.
Right.
It's just not that simple. But I liked what you were saying about the heaviness, because I've also heard lots of wisdom from many people that the truth is light. It's freeing. It's almost like a balloon. And a lie is heavy.
Yeah,
and
contracting.
It's demonstrative. So I think that's part of the process that we all go through when we're faced with a unique situation, is that we actually do get to be Lady Liberty and juggle instinct and intuition in that moment, because it allows us to go through the experiential learning process of knowing what the somatic intelligence means and what the fear-based programs that we've picked up are trying to instill upon our decision-making power. So I think it's yes and. And like, I was even visualizing when I first got with Carrie Michelle, I was having these huge eruptions in my body. And I'm like, what is this all about? Like, I really care about this woman. And is this my, I was going through it when we first got to, I've never talked about this on a podcast ever. This is pretty fucking crazy. This is like, I'm a little nervous to share this.
Okay.
But it's important because I know now that she's the perfect partner for me to heal. I know that. I trust that. It's light. It's free. It may not feel light and free all the time, but it's light and free in my understanding of it. But in the beginning, I was so afraid because I was so addicted to pornography and I was so in my own shit that I think my body was afraid. I think my ego was so afraid of like facing all the parts that I knew with her I'd have to face, because there's no fucking running from a good woman.
Yeah.
The greatest women in the world will shine a mirror on you and show you all the parts of yourself where you're not free, where you're stuck, where you're in addiction, where you're not being honest with yourself. But I had been through so many relationships before that I was in this process of gathering evidence of like, God, is she like this woman? Is she like that woman? I was going through my whole like memory bank of all the women I had been with. And you know, the only factor, and Fish talked about this in our men's group thread, with his experience, every single situation, the only common denominator was me. Yeah. It wasn't these other women at all.
Yeah.
It wasn't Corlin. It wasn't Amy. It wasn't Mary. It wasn't any of these people.
Yeah.
It was them coming into my life to teach me something about me.
Yeah.
And sometimes there is just like, we're not the right fit, and that's okay. And I think we've all been sold this really bullshit Cinderella story that when you're in a relationship, it has to be light and free and love and light all the time. I don't believe in that. I think that's actually speaking to our ego, and I think that blunts our intuition. I think real intuition, much like Hill talks about, gets formed over time through life experience. And so now I can, after 6 years with Carrie Michelle, I can say with lightness that she's the perfect match for me to heal all my stuff. And I know I am for her, even in moments where it doesn't feel like it. And there's no way that God would have blessed us with two beautiful children unless that was true, unless it was light. So do I know the future? Of course not. I don't know. I mean, the grounds for our relationship is like, we stay together unless there's infidelity or unless there's some type of abuse. Infidelity and abuse is the only way that my intuition would know this isn't right. Other than that, I write it out. I stay the course. And I wonder for you, going through what you've been through with women, I know it's been a beautiful path and also a painful path at times, right? For people that are struggling in relationship, when they start to use these codes, specifically like we'll do the Microdosing nasal spray, or we'll do the dialed, or we'll access these codes from entheogens, right? And they allow us to come together so that we can be in more harmony. How has entheogens, and really specifically this mushroom, allowed you to access truth in yourself when it comes to you being with a woman?
It really, for me, was more access and attention to space, and realizing that I really, I don't know if needed or wanted, or the missing component was space. And the more that I realized that, so I was like, okay, I want to dedicate my attention to space in a sense of consciousness. Like, I want to explore space consciousness, not like NASA space, but like the space in between my thoughts.
Well, NASA, it's all a sham.
Thank
That's
you.
a whole other psyop, y'all.
There's another psyop for sure.
They didn't land on the moon. All right, keep going.
Facts.
Somebody's like, what?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but space consciousness was the missing ingredient for me. Realizing that the creator within, is in that space. And that's what I just didn't have, because I was constantly in the doer. I was constantly on a leash to my wants. I was constantly on a leash to my psychological needs which were actually correlated to my blockages, so instead of feeling those blockages, I would resort to food or material goods or sex, right? So it was those blockages were blocking me from being the creator. So yeah, I'd say the missing ingredient was space, and that's what this really gave me, was space around my thoughts. And when I had space around my thoughts, I could literally tap in to that and then start. I love what you said about prayer, because then I really got to develop this communication with the divine. I call it prayer. And me too, Josh. I shifted my definition of what prayer is, or the way that I pray. And I don't know if there's an incorrect way to pray, but I would say that there's, as long as you realize what prayer actually is that, God or the creator isn't going to necessarily change your circumstances, but he can change you. If you give him the permission, he will create the space within you to hold the circumstances that you've actually created for yourself. That's the reality. Is many people get stuck into the victim of, why is this happening to me? Well, actually you created it. You just weren't aware of that. And if you allow God, the creator, to tap into that space, especially as a man, it's very important to be able to hold the space for what you've actually created in your life, whether it's a relationship, a business, family, or whatever. It's like, you just need to be able to hold that space. And I think in order to hold that space, one has to have like a kind of a relationship with space, or at least like a conscious awareness of what space actually is. And that's what it really was more of that, the awareness of space.
So what I got from you is that you learned through communication with God how to be in secure attachment style?
I guess, yeah, if that's one way to put it.
Because look, where my next question is coming from. It's coming from my own journey and everyone's journey in relationship, and how to utilize tools like entheogens, or like the Amanita, or even breath work. Pairing synergistic things like this is so potent for clearing out the clutter of the unconscious mind that we're projecting onto the person we say we love. It's so real. Totally. It's so real. So I'm curious, what did you learn the most from your past relationship and all relationships, without making them wrong? What did you learn the most about yourself, and how did this mushroom help you access that awareness?
That's great. Yeah. For one, the space thing, like I really needed to make space consciousness, awareness of space more of a priority, so I could go within and make clearing these blockages a priority, because I was showing up to the relationship with these blockages, and these blockages will, because I am those blockages, I was. So then I'm just attracting that to me. It's the mirror, like you're saying. So now my, partner, in this case, the former partner, was now reflecting back to me all my blockages. And then I'm resentful towards her because it's like constant challenge, constant uncomfortability. And then what's the issue is, which is myself again, is like, I had a programmed of, no, the relationship should be this way. And it's not. So now I'm just causing myself suffering because I'm resisting of what is. When in fact, that relationship was, exactly to your point, was to show me the things that I get to work on and not resist them, but embrace them. And it got me to look within, but I had to create that space for myself. I wasn't able to do it, or I chose not to do it with someone holding the mirror right up to my face. It was like, let me go within and do the work myself, so that I can show up however I choose to show up after that. Yeah.
You know what breaks my heart the most about love?
What's that?
And I heard Jason Silva talk about this once. He was the host of Brain Games, a really amazing philosophical mind.
Yeah.
He said the thing about love that hurts the most is that we know that one day we won't be able to love them in this life. We won't be able to hold them. And that's what's both beautiful and heartbreaking about love, is that it's eternal, but in the 3D realm, it's finite.
It's fleeting, yeah.
It's fleeting. And so there's both love and pain are on the same rail car.
Yeah.
And it's so hard, because when you love someone so deeply, you can't even imagine the thought of not being able to love them in human form again. And the only path to consciousness there is to realize that you will love them in eternity and they will love you too, in the same way that our grandparents are with us energetically right now, loving us and being with us. And it's just this crazy hologram we're experiencing. So why do you believe that? And again, all these questions are geared towards the resources and scaffolding that allow us to be in union, right? Amanita being one of them, but so is nonviolent communication. These are all just tools, y'all.
Tools.
They're literally just tools.
Yep.
Tools and codes.
Yep.
Do you believe, what do you believe about why people make it in union and why they don't? What's the codes there?
I think it all starts with, well, there's a lot there. Relationships are extremely complicated. Like we said, we're very complicated human beings on ourselves, by ourselves. We bring someone else in there, it's also complicated. If I had to summarize it again, like just going down to simplicity, I'd say it's such a tricky one to really get, man. But
we can go high and then end up in simplicity.
Okay.
You know?
I'd say it's, there's layers to it. There's many layers, but I'd say where it ends up on is compatibility. It's like compatibility. That's what I realized with my last relationship. Like, she was an amazing woman, an amazing human being, very unique in her ways, but regardless, amazing. And the way that I saw it at the end was, she's creating her own music, her own notes. She's an instrument of God, and she's creating her music and I'm creating my music. And for whatever reason, these notes just didn't harmonize. They weren't in rhythm, So it wasn't that her notes or anything wrong or bad, and same for me. Like, we weren't making beautiful music together. And I think that's what it really comes down to, is the compatibility of, and what does that really mean is like creating the dance together of the masculine and the feminine so that it's in harmony. And, when does, can she let you take the lead in the dance? Can she submit into the dance? Can you hold her in the dance, in these poses and these uncomfortable poses? Can you hold the space? Can you be aware of the tonalities in the music and all this stuff? I really see it as a dance, this life as well, besides a game. And that's where I'm, as you said, into the 40s, it's shifting more from a game into this dancing with the feminine energy that is so amazing and so beautiful. And
yet so mysterious.
And so mysterious.
So mysterious.
Because it's not in our, I'm a male, you're a male. So it's the gender, the law of gender is a real thing as well.
Oh, yes.
So it's like, okay, the only way that we can experience this full spectrum of life is to dance with the opposite gender, the opposite polarity. Otherwise we'll never really be whole. And we never will be whole, but at least we get to dance with it. So yeah, it's really about dancing with it. And now I'm just choosing to dance with music that there's more harmony in. That's all. And I also realize nothing is permanent. It's only in that illusion of permanence that there's that attachment to, like, this has to be this way or this should stay this way. And that's really the answer I was trying to get to. Took a long way of saying it, but the reason I think relationships don't work or don't last is because people think, once again, in the conditioned mind, that it should be this way when it's going to be whatever way it's going to be. And love is allowing that to be. So it's like not getting, caught up in the limited perception, like just allow it to be what it's supposed to be. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes sense to my body when I hear it, because the song of which you speak has to be an agreed upon song. Like the orchestra has to want to play the same song. And I think, whether it's Dr. Stan Tatkin or Mark Groves or any relationship specialist I've interviewed, they all say the same thing in different words. And that is, when you are starting a relationship, many times how the relationship starts is how the relationship ends. And so if you are starting with instruments that are not tuned, it is a Molotov cocktail built on destruction. Yet, yes, and in the Word of God, if you both can recognize through humble service to self and others and God, that there's a humility, that there's an honesty about when you started, that you can look at each other and say, hey, you were out of tune when we started, huh? Hey, you were out of tune when we started. Okay, well, what is the song that we'd like to create? And if there can be a shared altar of humility and vulnerability, I think that you can reharmonize. I really do. And I believe in the power of love to reharmonize people that's instruments were maybe mistuned by their parents.
Totally.
Right? Or just by life
Programs,
itself.
yeah.
So I think it's always a yes and sometimes obviously if there's infidelity and abuse for any person out there who's dealt with that, like that's a clear signal from God that this is not correct. But one thing I've been praying for in my prayers is to show me, God, what are the parts of myself that I don't see? And my prayer is always the same. It's the same thing every day in the sauna. God, what is it that I most need to learn? And how can I be most humble to learn it? And that's in every capacity, right? Mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, financially. And what is coming through relationally right now, or I guess you could say emotionally for me, is I am still learning how to feel and how to come from regulation and space holding capacity with my woman versus reactivity or hypervigilance. And so is she. But I think the more that people can almost like, a braided cord come together and be in humility about that, the sky's the limit, y'all. But if one person, if a man or a woman isn't willing to interweave in that humility or to kneel at the altar of humility, there's no way it would work. There's no way it would work because like you said, that people would be playing their own notes. That's why you can be in the bed with somebody and you can be a mile apart.
Yeah.
You can literally be sleeping with your wife or husband.
Totally.
And there could be a grand fucking canyon between you two.
Yeah.
And you know what I believe heals that canyon? It's the connection to this wisdom that we've been talking about this entire podcast. It is reconnecting with the wisdom of nature. When I fight nature in any way, it's more painful. So let's bring this wagon home right now, like because we've been going for a couple hours, right? And
I love it.
This is so enjoyable. This is so enjoyable. Please share this podcast with somebody who's been struggling with any concept that we've been exploring here. The ultimate prize, I believe, is peace. That's the ultimate prize. We all want peace. We think it's going to come from certain zeros in the bank account or, the home looking a certain way or cars. I mean, look outside in modernity. It's like, how many people do you know that have all the shit that you think you want and they're fucking miserable?
Totally.
And I know you've been there. You've seen it.
Yeah.
You've been in that life yourself.
Yeah.
What is the greatest lie that we have all believed to be true about being at peace that is actually the biggest paradox and not true at all?
Yeah, peace. Well, peace is power. And like you said, it's the thing or the energy or the frequency that transcends everything. And you could have everything externally, but if you don't have peace, you've missed the whole point of the game, of the school. And I would say that the biggest lie about it is that it's really just cultivated from within. It's an internal game. It's an internal job. And you can make peace a priority in your life, in your existence, if you choose to. And someone could say, okay, well, how do you do that? Well, you practice these codes that we've been talking about and make them a priority of acceptance. You won't have peace if there's no acceptance, right? Forgiveness, another one. You won't have peace if you're not forgiving yourself, others. Love, same thing. These are all things that encompass, you have those codes, you pay more attention to those things, you make them a practice in your daily life, and you will start to, have peace and just make peace the priority. But it's really a choice. It's really a choice point that you can choose to have peace. And I'm not saying it's easy, but it is simple in the fact of like, as complex as life is, and I get it, there's all these multidimensionalities of everything. I get that. Trust me. I get caught up in that a lot. But at its core, Josh, it's so simple in the fact that you can always choose peace.
On the screen right now is your new code, and it is a new triangle, and it is the triangle for peace, and it is forgiveness, acceptance, and honesty. If I can be honest, if I can accept, if I can forgive, like this is the triangle of peace. That's what I got from you. So screenshot that, y'all, and share it, because this is the wisdom that we're all seeking. We all are so hungry for this wisdom, but it can feel so outside of us at times. And all of those things that you mentioned that were in that triangle, the acceptance, the forgiveness, the honesty, all of that stuff comes from within me. None of that comes from anyone else. And just because you said it, you just reminded us that it's already in us anyway.
It's already in you.
So thank you for reminding us.
Of course.
What do we miss, brother, when it comes to this conversation of tools, resources, codes, scaffolding, framework to build this incredible version that we all know is possible of ourselves, and using this dialed at scale to completely flip the market of psychedelics versus, I hate to even put them against each other, versus entheogens when it comes to mental health?
What a question. Yeah, I'd say just remember that it is all within you. Start with that, start with really going within. And in that, you'll realize that it is a dance. And in that dance, just like you're dancing, there's a communication that's going on there. You're dancing with the divine nature of yourself. And when I say yourself, I don't necessarily mean your identity self, although you will be dancing with that as well. But it's really with your higher self, with your soul self. And the more that you realize that, and, life is the dancer. Life, that beingness, that life force energy, or that chi, whatever you want to call it, that's the dancer that's moving through you. And you just have to get out of your own way, the conditioned mind, get out of your own way and allow yourself, give yourself permission to be the dancer, to be the dance of life. Things will flow from there. That's what I would say. That's my ambition, is to just allow life to utilize me in this dance.
Can you feel how this podcast has been so exceptional and so real because part and parcel of the Amanita? Like I have felt it many times. I mean, it's not like this trippy or I'm like, it's like this real subtle, palpable essence of slowing down and of really listening and of being connected. I mean, it obviously helps that we're friends and we've known each other for a while now.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for being my guest, man. What a great round 2.
Thank you.
This is one of those times where the sequel was actually better than the first movie.
Terminator.
This round 2 was better than the first time. Now, the first time was great too.
Yeah.
So eons.com, thank you for the hookup. There's a discount code on the screen. It's hard to make these products. It's not easy. We truly appreciate this discount. It's on the screen. It's in your show notes, wherever you're watching, wherever you're listening. Thank you for being here, man.
Thank you, man. This was awesome.
Appreciate you. Love you so much.
I love you too, Josh. Thank you.
Okay, guys, until we see you again, we're both wishing you love and wellness, but most importantly, peace and power.